Plenty of blustery showers feeding in around western areas and northwestern coasts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So overnight, under those clear spells, it is still going to be a chilly night on offer, but generally winds easing away with clearer skies. Could even see a little bit of frost by the time we reach the morning. Now, as we head into Tuesday, once again, a brighter day overall for many of us. There are still a few showers around at times around Northern Ireland, northwestern England, still around coasts of Scotland. But elsewhere, many places should see lots of dry weather, plenty of sunny spells, and with average temperatures, should feel rather pleasant for the time of year. Bye for now.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Of course, we're broadcasting live for you from the very heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, a petition calling for a general election has now amassed over 2.2 million signatures, and one of them was Brit acting legend Michael Caine. But Keir Starmer, the politician, remember, who campaigned for 3 years for a second Brexit referendum, well, he simply brushed it aside. Are those petitions powerful or are they pointless? And as Storm Bert finally blows over, the great clean-up operation begins in earnest, with at least 4 dead, flood damage and commuter chaos. We'll have the latest from our reporters live from the UK's heaviest impacted areas. And Nigel Farage has blasted the UK's new national security advisor for jetting to Mauritius to surrender the Chagos Islands before Trump's inauguration. The Reform leader adds, if we treat the USA like this, can they still regard us as an ally? Are Labour on a collision course with the Trump train? That's all coming up in your next hour. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Now, here we go. 2.2 million people have signed that petition for another general election. Now, I know these petitions are performative. They're largely pointless. But here's my point. For 3 years, Sir Keir Starmer campaigned for a second referendum on Brexit. Another roll of the dice when he didn't get his way. And suddenly, no, that's not how our system doesn't work that way here in Britain. No, you had your chance for a vote and we must abide by it. Double standards. Once again, do you think not from Sir Keir Starmer? He wanted a second vote when he didn't get the result he wanted. And now millions of voters haven't got the result they wanted. They want to roll the dice again. Sir Keir Starmer completely does not want to play poker. What do you reckon? Time for a second election? Time to vote again? Or, I'm afraid, is it too little too late? There's no point crying about it. After all, Brexiteers were complaining about Remainers wanted a second vote for all of those years. But don't forget, this is the Prime Minister himself who wanted another election back in 2016. Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. Just after 3 o'clock, the top story this afternoon. The Environment Secretary says that the government stands ready to offer support to communities in Wales among the worst hit by severe flooding. Multiple rail services are still cancelled while more than 160 flood warnings remain in place. The storm Bird brings widespread disruption. Hundreds of homes in South Wales were left underwater, roads have been turned into rivers and winds of more than 80 miles an hour were recorded across parts of the UK. A new yellow weather warning's been issued in Scotland and the Met Office is also warning of more heavy rain in northern parts. That will last until midnight tonight. Meanwhile, over 300 flights have been cancelled and it's only the second storm of the season so far. Steve Reid says the UK's flood defences are in the worst condition on record, but he added the government has committed £2.4 billion in upgrades.
Well, I've been kept updated throughout the weekend on the situation that's going on, and I've just come out of an emergency meeting with the Environment Agency. First thing to say is I want to offer my sympathies to everybody who's been affected by these floods and how devastating it is if your home or your business in particular get affected in this way. But I'd also like to offer my thanks to the emergency services on the ground who have been out there straight away this weekend, making sure people are kept safe.
Kemi Badenoch has pledged to slash red tape and to rewire the economy. That's as she sought to persuade businesses to back the Conservative Party. The annual CBI, Confederation of British Industry Conference, has been taking place today as business chiefs unite to warn Labour that their tax rises will stunt growth. CBI chief Ray Newton-Smith says firms were caught off guard by the hike in national insurance contributions in the Chancellor's recent budget. Ms Badenoch told the conference that taxes must come down and that risk-takers in business who create jobs should be rewarded.
The new government believes that invisible businesses can absorb these costs, but it is everyday people who bear the brunt, either in higher prices or lower wages, sometimes both. I'm often criticised for talking about capitalism. Someone once told me that capitalism is old-fashioned. I don't think so. I think it is important that we explain what capitalism in a free market environment means. Capitalism is not a dirty word. Wealth is not a dirty word. Profit is not a dirty word. But we need to start explaining how these things deliver for the people out there.
Police say the 8-year-old girl injured in a double shooting was in a car with her parents and 2-year-old sibling when a gunman opened fire. The Met Police says a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after that double shooting in West London. The girl's 34-year-old father has also been left with potentially life-changing injuries. And the girl was undergoing surgery but is now in a stable condition. The pair were both taken to hospital after being shot in Ladbroke Grove just after 5:30 yesterday afternoon. We also understand a 32-year-old woman was taken to hospital as a precaution after the incident, but wasn't hurt. Well, let's get you an update now on the situation in Egypt, where more than a dozen people are still missing after a tourist boat sank off the Red Sea. That's just off the coast there. Search operations are continuing for the remaining passengers and some crew members. We understand the boat, named Sea Story, was carrying some 45 people, including 31 tourists of various nationalities and 14 crew. We will keep across that for you, bring you any more details as they come into us. Meanwhile, bar staff will be trained here to deal with incidents of drink spiking under government plans to tackle violence against women and girls. Number 10 announced that workers in the nighttime economy will be instructed on how to spot and to prevent cases, as well as help collect evidence. That's under a new pilot scheme to be rolled out from December. The plan is up for 10,000 bar staff across the country to be trained by spring of next year. Further details have also been discussed today at a meeting in Downing Street between the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and Chief Constables, transport bosses and industry executives. The Prime Minister's reiterated his plans for spiking to become a specific offence, with hopes it will give people the confidence to come forward, he said, and told broadcasters this morning that the number of reported incidents is still way below the number of cases. While London's Met Police have said reports of spiking have increased by 13% in the last year. Foreign Secretary David Lammy says we will do all we can to offer support to a British man who has reportedly been captured by Russian forces while fighting for Ukraine. In a video circulating online, a man dressed in military clothing identifies himself as 22-year-old James Scott Rees-Anderson and says he formerly served in the British Army. He speaks with an English accent in that video while appearing to have his hands tied. Russian state news agency TASS quotes a military source saying what they call a UK mercenary has been taken prisoner in the Kursk area of Russia, part of which Ukraine has held since launching a surprise offensive in August. And Barbara Taylor Bradford, the best-selling novelist who wrote A Woman of Substance, has sadly died today at the age of 91. The Leeds-born author, who sold more than 90 million books, died peacefully at her home yesterday after a short illness and was surrounded by loved ones to the very end, her family said. Taylor Bradford, who was often labelled the Grand Dame of blockbusters, hit the big time when A Woman of Substance was published in 1979, making her an overnight success. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at the top of the hour.
Thank you, Sam. Now, many Brits are indicating their anger and frustration with the current Labour government by signing a petition calling for yet another general election. Now, despite Brits heading to the polls 5 times in the last 10 years, they still want another go because over 2.2 million people have now signed this petition demanding yet another one, which was launched accusing the Prime Minister of going back on his manifesto commitments. And currently, as you can see, there's a live ticker on your screen. It is at 2.209, 578 signatures, and it's going up like a ticker tape. This is what the Prime Minister said when asked about this on ITV this morning.
Look, I remind myself that very many people didn't vote Labour at the last election. Yeah. I'm not surprised that many of them want a rerun. That isn't how our system works. There would be plenty of people who didn't want us in the first place. So, look, what I focus on is the decisions that I have to make.
Well, there we go. Joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, always an absolute delight to see you, especially on a Monday. Chris, that's not how our system works, the Prime Minister says. But he wasn't saying that in 2016. He was the man who wanted a second referendum on Brexit. He led the People's Vote campaign to reverse the votes of 17.4 million. But now suddenly, no, that's not how we do it. Is this an example of another Starmer U-turn?
I don't think so, Martin. I mean, welcome again to your show on Monday. I mean, essentially, back then, he was told in no uncertain terms that Keir Starmer, you can't have a second referendum. That was a once-in-a-generation moment, we were told, by the Tory government. So you can have a second vote, and maybe even a best of three if you don't like the response of the second vote. This is very interesting, this petition. It's put on the Parliament's website. It says, I would like there to be another general election, the petitioner says. I believe the current Labour government have gone back on their promises they had laid out in lead up to the last election. And to that point, 2.2 million people and counting have signed it in about 72 hours. Now, if more than 100,000 people sign a petition in Parliament, Martin, that means there must be a debate in Parliament about that. So we wait to see when MPs can have a debate about whether there should be an election now. We asked the Prime Minister's official spokesman in our meeting with him earlier, called the lobby meeting, and asked him whether he felt there should be an election now, and we were told no in no uncertain terms. Also, we heard from Keir Starmer. He was on this morning earlier on ITV, and he made very clear it's not going to happen. He says it would be there before the choice was made back in July. I mean, the nature of our democracy is there will be millions of people wanting an election right now because millions of people didn't vote for this government. He knows very well that only 1 in 3 of those who could vote voted for Labour, and just 1 in 2 of all adults who in this country voted for this government. There's a long way to go, but what's driving the fury about this government so far is these changes that we didn't know were coming were not set out in that manifesto. The government would say they warned about the increase in employers' national insurance, but for many, when they said no increase in national insurance, that was assumed to include the employers' contributions. And likewise with the issue with taking away the winter fuel allowance, that was not forecast by pre-election. So there is concerns, and that's why you've got this interesting debate online. But for me, I'm afraid it's an academic debate, Martin. It's not going to happen.
And Chris, you're there behind you at the CBI conference. Of course, Kemi Badenoch, leader of the opposition, gave a speech earlier on. And all eyes now on the economy. Fix the foundations of the economy was the promise. But it has to be said, Chris, those foundations feel like they've got a bit of a wobble. A lot of businesses queuing up today to say that Britain is looking down the barrel or perhaps sliding into negative territory towards a recession. The McVitie's boss, Salman Amin, he's the chief executive, the McVitie's biscuit king. He makes more chocolate digestives than anybody. He's laying into the government, saying it's become uninvestable in Britain. Chris, that comment takes the biscuit.
It does, and in fact, they are giving away free McVitie's biscuits here at the conference, Martin. I'll bring you down a packet next time I see you. But yeah, there's no question that Number 10 have been criticised here by the CBI. We've heard earlier from the Director General, and they made clear that they felt that imposing all these tax increases, as we saw in that budget, is not what was expected. They said the profits aren't something you can stash away in a pillow. That's money you can invest in employing more employees, and that's what they feel is less likely because of all the, not least national insurance, but also other areas such as the Angela Rayner workers' reforms. But Number 10 have been very clear on that also today. They said that that was once in a Parliament budget there to wipe the slate clean. We are hearing from Rachel Reeves at 4:10. I'll be in the hall there reporting back to you after 5 o'clock. Very interesting to see how that goes down. If she's booed, any heckling, any concern, because I mean, while welcoming the stability you get from a landslide victory by a Labour government, and that was mentioned by the CBI earlier, they won't like the fact that those taxes have mainly been levied on businesses.
Okay, Chris Hope, we'll come back to you for 4:10 when Rachel Reeves is expected to speak. When you finished hobnobbing with the biscuit barons and the rich and the powerful. Chris Hope, always a pleasure to speak to you soon. I've got some breaking news for you now, and more than a dozen people are missing after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. Search operations continue for the remaining passengers and crew members, and the Foreign Office has said it is providing consular support to a number of British nationals and their families. amid reports that 4 Britons are missing after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea off of Egypt. The boat, named Sea Story, was carrying 45 people, including 31 tourists of varying nationalities and indeed 14 additional crew. So that's a breaking news story, and we'll bring you more on that as we get more details here on GB News. Let's get back to discussing the politics now. And I'm joined in the studio by Anna Gross, who's the political correspondent at the Financial Times. Welcome to the studio. Always a pleasure, Anna, to have your company. So we're joking around. We're in a jocular mood today. But 2.2 million people have signed this petition. We know they're performative. We know they're constitutionally pointless. But do you think this government is having a fairly major wobble early term?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty challenging time. I think there have been some big missteps. I think the very first was the winter fuel payments saga, then leaving it so long between the election and the budget, which just left ages without them actually releasing any policy. And then there's been this massive business backlash to the budget, to the national insurance increases, which Chris was just telling us about. It is challenging that the government is facing a hell of a lot of frustration, anger from many different quarters. And I think, you know, that the 2 million people signing this petition, as you say, very unlikely to have any impact whatsoever. It's barely going to even be publicly recognised by most of the cabinet. But it is a kind of one of the more visible signs of this public anger.
And it is worth pointing out that there is no duty to have even a debate about this. They can brush it away. And in fact, let's not forget, 6 million people signed a petition to try and reverse Brexit. And a lot of people watching this show would have been up in arms if that were ever action. So petitions are just what they are, just a way of voicing your discontent. Let's talk about the CBI conference in particular. As you said, there has been something of a backlash from business. We heard this morning 2/3 of British businesses are slashing their hiring plans because of national insurance hikes. Guess what? You know, if you up the costs to employers of employing people, they may have to hire less of them. Who'd have thought? It seems the only person who didn't think that was the Chancellor. And then the Chancellor now is being accused of forcing employers into damage control mode. So as a consequence, Anna, the investment is drying up, the confidence is dissipating.
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't actually know yet whether the investment is drying up. That is certainly what businesses are warning. They're saying that their plans are going to be impacted. They're not going to be able to hire as many people. The other thing that businesses may do, that they talk about less, they say we're going to hire fewer people. The other thing they might do is just give people smaller pay rises, because that's another way to keep the same headcount, and that's going to have a kind of long-term impact, but be less obvious to voters. I think businesses feel as though there's a triple whammy. And the triple whammy is, yes, the national insurance rises, but it's also the workers' rights package, and it's also the national minimum wage increases. And they say, you know, perhaps one of them could have been manageable, we could have steered through it, but with all three, you're really clobbering us, and it feels disproportionate.
And again, you know, pardon my biscuit puns, but few crumbs of comfort from the McVitie's boss today, Salman. And man, this is serious business when, you know, huge companies like this are saying it's becoming harder to understand what the case for investment is in the United Kingdom to make a difference in the growth rate of the economy. He said he was previously very bullish about the British market, and now even a huge company like McVitie's are thinking about putting the freeze on things. These are serious things for the Chancellor to be hearing.
Yeah, and I think we will see whether that it has as big an impact as on investment and growth as these companies say. Obviously, it's their prerogative to lobby very hard against these things. But I think what you can say from a political point of view is that Labour spent months, if not years, courting favour with business. It was doing this dance to try and win them over. It was having them for breakfast with smoked salmon. And actually, by the time it came to July 4th, business leaders we were speaking to were saying, you know what? We really believe in Labour. We really think they've got a good vision. We think they'll be better stewards of the economy than the Conservative Party. Rachel Reeves, in particular, was sort of the golden girl. Everyone in the city was saying, Rachel Reeves, she's got a really smart head on her shoulders. And I think what's damaging here is that really feels like it's coming undone, if it's not already actually come undone completely. The business community seriously does seem to have turned against Labour.
It may have been smoked salmon on the menu, but they're already leaping at the chance to invest now. And isn't this a concern? It does feel that the mood is just becoming rather in the doldrums in the business community. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the messaging that's out there is incredibly negative. I think the counterpoint to that is that there are companies that are investing. Labour's figures can't be entirely trusted. They say that they managed to secure 63 billion of investment at their investment summit. I know that a large proportion of that had already been done or had already been committed. But still, I do think that there are some areas where companies are keen to invest. Data centres is one of them, where the government is kind of promising to change planning regulations and things like that. So I don't think it's entirely like this is the end of investment for businesses, but I do think it's clearly a more challenging environment. OK, excellent. So that's Anna Gross, political correspondent at the FT. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Now, coming up, as Storm Bert finally blows over, the great clean-up operation begins with at least 4 dead, flood damage and commuter chaos. We'll have the latest from our reporters live from the UK's heaviest hit areas next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Telegraph now with bra news. And Lewis, do you remember when you took your girlfriend for her first fitting?
This is M&S Trans Row. I've got a youngish girlfriend. But
she was youngish when you first met her 20 years ago.
Yes, stay young. I don't like. I don't even want to read it. So it's so pervy. It sounds pervy. If I think it's pervy, it's probably very pervy.
Okay.
It says it's first bras for young things. They can't even say young girls.
Well, let's have a look at it. It is it's upsetting. Smart, strong, supported. First bras for fearless young things. So this has been picked up. Actually, Bev Turner from GB News. Took a photo of it, put it online, it's created a bit of a furore.
First of all, those kind of bras are basically unnecessary. They were, when I was that age...
Wearing your bra?
Wear those bras. They used to call them training bras. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they really were necessary at that time because they didn't have, like...
You've really got to the heart of this, haven't you?
This is one time I'm not going to interrupt you.
Yeah, it's not... No, they're not really necessary. It's like, it's not... Because otherwise...
So really, this is a non-story. Okay. Well, yeah. I think it's... I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of me that was kind of like, pick your battles. Is this the hill to die on? I don't know.
The young things, they're saying I would say it's a dodgy advert anyway, it feels like, because saying young things feels like... It's as it says here, like objective. It's sort of saying that they're objects.
Yes, but this is my point about the West. Like, are you aware of a company called Pretty Little Thing? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, one of the major brands for young women in this country is called Pretty Little Thing. I just think that's hilarious. Where were the feminists when they named that? So you go on the tube any day of the week and it says Pretty Little Thing and there's these women in tiny dresses and I don't know.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, more than a dozen people are missing after a tourist boat in the Red Sea sank off the coast of Egypt. Breaking news story here. Search operations continue for the remaining passengers and also the crew members. And the Foreign Office has said it is providing consular support to a number of British nationals and their families amid reports that 4 Britons are missing after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea off of Egypt. And the boat, named the Sea Story, was carrying 45 people, including 31 tourists of varying nationalities and also 14 crew members. We've got some pictures now of this scene. I believe you can see here. This is off that coast of Egypt there, the Red Sea. And search operation from the shore continuing. Just to repeat, it's carrying 45 people on board, including 31 tourists of varying nationalities and 14 crew. The Foreign Office is offering consular support, so they will know which Brits, they'll be trying to find out which Brits were on that boat, and they'll be offering support to families. The Sea Story, carrying 45 people, 31 tourists, has sunk off the coast. More on that story as we get it here on GB News. Now back to Britain, meanwhile, and Storm Bert has ravaged the country this weekend with at least 4 deaths suspected to have been caused by the storm's chaos. Now, with 200 flood alerts still in place and a major incident declared in South Wales, it doesn't seem to be ending anytime just yet. Over 300 flights cancelled so far, and it's only the second storm of the season. And we're joined now by GBNews reporter Adam Cherry, who is live from Pontypridd in the south of Wales. Adam, welcome to the show. So what's the latest on the ground there? Has the storm done its worst? Bring us up to date.
Yeah, the worst of the storm, fingers crossed, appears to have passed, although for the people here, the damage will be long-lasting. And we've been speaking to residents all day long who are all saying that they don't feel the alarm bells were rung early enough. Fingers being pointed in all sorts of directions, but mainly at the National Resources for Wales Environmental Agency, their equivalent here in Wales, saying that although they did get some prior warning, it was so quick that they didn't have time to get enough sandbags in front of the doorways and so on and protect themselves from the flash flooding from the River Taff behind me, which you can see very quickly rose up and into the houses. Now, in the last hour or so, the Welsh First Minister, Eluned Morgan, has been visiting businesses in the local area. And we spoke to her and asked, given that 4 years ago, a similar storm, Storm Dennis, affected this same area to a similar effect, why hasn't more been done in the intervening period? And this is what she had to say.
Well, I think we've got lessons to learn, as we learnt after Storm Dennis, and we've put those into practice. There are instances where it's going to be really difficult to protect properties. There's examples around here where there's a river running underneath. It comes from underneath the properties, and that's really difficult then to protect, no matter what you put in place under those circumstances.
Now, obviously, the local authorities, particularly the fire service, have been helping bail out the water and protect people as much as they can, but Mother Nature is very powerful. That said, I think the frustration here is palpable. They're not going to be able to save everyone or save every piece of land or property, but given that just 4 years ago, as I said, we were in a similar situation, you have to wonder if the local people are getting a little bit fed up and not seeing enough action in the intervening period from their local government, from the authorities, to stop this happening. It's not like this river is going anywhere, Martin. This is going to happen again.
And Adam Cherry, a lot of people contact us here at GB News from all over Britain saying precisely that. It seems to be that they react when disaster strikes with sandbags, but they're not doing that maintenance work, they're not dredging water channels, they're not ensuring safe and effective drainage away from these areas. And hey presto, when the storm comes, we're in the same situation again. Adam Cherry, have people there in Pontypridd been telling you things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the common refrain we've been hearing all day. And actually, they've also been saying that the insurance is going to be a problem as well, because if this keeps happening, you can bet your bottom dollar that somewhere in that insurance policy, there's a clause that says something to the effect of, well, we'd rather not pay this out. I mean, insurance companies are never particularly happy to open the coffers, but in situations like this, particularly when there is a possibility of other floods in the immediate future, perhaps, is it going to be even more difficult to get any money back by the time they need it? So it's a real difficult situation, and the people are a little bit fed up at this point.
Adam Cherry, thank you very much there from the River Taff in Pontypridd. Pontypridd still looking very swollen behind you there, that river. Thank you Adam Cherry. You know, get in touch with me here at GB News if this is what you feel like at home, because so often we hear that those river channels, they're just not dredged, they're not drained, they're not maintained, they're not taken care of, despite so many residents. When my dad lives in Loudham, the river always overflows at Gunthorpe, and until very, very recently, when they installed a bypass for the water, there were floods every single year. The local pub had to be closed down 3 times. All the locals knew that the government, the local authority, was not doing enough to dredge those water channels, and it happened time and time and time again. Is it cost cutting? What is it? Is it maintaining the environment? Are they putting toads and newts before locals? Get in touch. GB News at GBviews at gbnews.com is the way to do that. There's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including calls for a review into the use of non-crime hate incidents in the wake of an investigation into Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson. I'll be joined by Harry Miller. He's the fearless free speech warrior who arrested a copper. He got so fed up with them probing their nose into his business. He'll be joining me in the studio. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you. The latest news from the newsroom at just after 3:30. Well, we now know that 4 British tourists are missing after a tourist boat has sunk off the coast of the Red Sea. Egypt's search operations are continuing for the remaining passengers, including, as I say, we now know those 4 British tourists, and crew members are also among those missing. The Foreign Office here in the UK has said it is providing consular support to those 4 British nationals and their families amid reports that they are missing after a tourist yacht sank earlier today. That boat, named Sea Story, was carrying 45 people, though according to reports, 36 people was the maximum number of people it was able to carry. 31 tourists of varying nationalities and 14 crew are believed to be on board. We are keeping across any of the latest developments here in the newsroom, and we'll bring those latest lines to you as they come in. In other news, the Environment Secretary says the government is standing ready to offer further support to communities in Wales that are among those worst hit by recent floods. Several rail operators cancelled services today, while more than 160 flood warnings remain in place as Storm Bert has brought a further widespread disruption. Hundreds of homes in South Wales have been left underwater, roads have been turned into rivers, and winds of up to 82 miles an hour were recorded across parts of the UK. A new yellow weather warning's been issued in Scotland, meanwhile, and the Met Office is warning of heavy rain in northern parts, while the warnings last until midnight tonight. Over 300 flights have already been cancelled, and it is only the second storm of the season. In a speech at the Confederation of British Industry Conference, leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, says we need to rewire the economy. The annual conference has been taking place today as businesses are uniting to warn Labour that their tax rises will, they say, stunt growth. The chief of the CBI, Rain Newton-Smith, earlier said that firms were caught off guard by the hike in national insurance contributions announced in the Chancellor's budget. Ms Badenoch told the conference we need to bring down taxes and reward the risk takers in business who create jobs.
The new government believes that invisible businesses can absorb these costs, but it is everyday people who bear the brunt, either in higher prices or lower wages, sometimes both. I'm often criticised for talking about capitalism. Someone once told me that capitalism is old-fashioned. I don't think so. I think it is important that we explain what capitalism in a free market environment means. Capitalism is not a dirty word. Wealth is not a dirty word. Profit is not a dirty word. But we need to start explaining how these things deliver for the people out there.
A 22-year-old man has been arrested in London after an 8-year-old girl was injured in a double shooting. She was in a car with her parents and 2-year-old sibling when that gunman opened fire. It was taking place in West London yesterday at around 5:30. The girl's 34-year-old father has also been left with potentially life-changing injuries. And the girl was undergoing surgery but is now in a stable condition. The 32-year-old woman was also taken to hospital as a precaution after the incident, but we now know she was not hurt. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, Sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, get in touch with me in the usual ways. That's gbviews@gbnews.com. What about his petition? Do you think we deserve another election, or is that precisely what Remainers did back in 2016? Except, don't forget, one of the people who wanted a second roll of the dice was the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Plus, I'll be joined by this man, Harry Miller. He wants non-crime hate incidents finally stamping out. He got so fed up with it last week, he arrested a copper. You won't want to miss that. I'm Martin Daubney, here on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A mix of clear spells and showers, though some longer spells of persistent rain in parts of northwest Scotland, turning chilly as we head into the overnight period too. Storm Bert, that sits just to the northeast of the country, still continues to bring in some outbreaks of rain across the north and plenty of blustery winds across the country too, with a yellow Met Office rain warning in force across parts of northwest Scotland. Still plenty of blustery showers elsewhere, particularly in western areas, though a few feeding in inland overnight too, particularly across parts of the south where they could be heavy and a little bit blustery at times too. There will still also be plenty of clear skies overnight where it's going to turn chilly with a risk of fog by the time we reach the morning, perhaps even some localised frost in places too. So those showers continuing around coastal areas of Scotland, still quite blustery in parts of northeast Scotland too, but under those clear skies a risk of frost as well. Still plenty of showers across northern coasts of Northern Ireland too and northwest England, and still plenty of those showers feeding into western parts of Wales and England. It's mainly across central and far eastern areas where we'll see those clear skies, those drier spells overnight and that risk of frost by the time we reach the morning. Heading into Tuesday, it's generally a much brighter day for all. Still can't rule out a risk of a shower, particularly once again around northwestern coasts at times, along southern coasts too. But many areas seeing plenty of sunshine, much lighter winds through the day as well. So even though temperatures fairly similar, it's probably going to be feeling like a much more pleasant day on offer. Away from northeastern Scotland, where there's still going to be plenty of blustery showers too. Now into tomorrow evening, we'll begin to start to see a bit of a change. Heavy outbreaks of rain and some blustery winds moving in from the southwest, but to the far north, a clear and cold night on offer with some frost and possibly some icy stretches. And some frost and more fog as we head to the end of the week too. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Flooding affecting many parts of the country still this afternoon. Let's go to Henstridge Marsh in Somerset firstly, with the A30 currently impassable between the Industrial Estate turnoff and Kington Magna. Semmington in Wiltshire, the A361's closed by the Littleton roundabout for flooding. Barford Bridge, if you're heading through Bradford and Avon, that's closed for flooding by the railway bridge. And also St Margaret Street in the area, that's closed by the station approach. Northbound A1M's part blocked just after Welling Garden City at Junction 6 and queuing. Northbound M1 around Luton North 11A. Delays in the roadworks back to Junction 11 at the scene of an earlier collision. And a lane shut for emergency barrier repairs in Hampshire. This is the southbound M3 queuing. That's just after the M27 interchange at Junction 14. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, a former Metropolitan Police Commissioner has urged ministers to review the use of non-crime hate incidents. This comes as a report by the Policy Exchange think tank. Estimates that up to 60,000 man-hours and woman-hours, or ZER hours, of police time is taken up investigating these incidents each and every year. So, is it time to start policing the streets and stop policing the tweets? Well, I'm now joined in the studio by the founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. I think I know where you stand on this, Harry, because you took the government to court over this, and in 2021 December found in your favour that non-crime hate incidents were something that should be consigned to history, and yet here we are, they're back. What's going on?
Yeah, well, a little bit like a state-sponsored case of herpes. You think you've got rid of them, and they just come back again and again and again. They need to be got rid of, not because of a political decision, but because of a court decision. The second highest court in the land, the Court of Appeal, declared that in most instances, non-crime hate incidents are illegal. So what the Home Secretary needs to do is set an example to the police by obeying the law. You wouldn't have thought that was too difficult, would you? Just go out and you reread Miller versus the College of Policing, and it will clear that up for you, no problem at all. I'm available to the Home Secretary. If she wants schooling in this matter, I will give my time up and I will tell her why non-crime hate incidents are A, unlawful, and B, completely and utterly useless.
Except they still trundle on. How many police and crime commissioners are there in the country, Harry, and how many of them are in favour of carrying on with these non-crime hate incidents? Do you know?
Yeah, well, there's more than 40 police and crime commissioners, and the vast majority are all in favour of them because it's easy policing. You don't need any evidence. There's no need to go to court. All you need to do is look at somebody and go, ha-ha, they're hateful, and then you can slap a non-crime hate incident on them without any due process whatsoever. And the other thing is, of course, it's entirely non-appealable. You can't appeal. There's no 12 good men and true judging whether or not you have done this or not. They simply slap it on you. It's like a mark of Cain. It's like stamping your forehead with a great big letter H for heretic because you've said something that the establishment does not like. And that's why they're so keen to keep them, because it is easy, lazy, political policing. It's the kind of thing that the Stasi would absolutely enjoy. But in terms of effectiveness, it's right up there with the Stasi's old habit of keeping smells in a jar, farts in a box, that kind of thing. That's exactly how useful it is. They have no use whatsoever beyond marking somebody out as being a wrong 'un.
But, Harry Miller, you do accept that we must have hate speech laws, we must police speech where it's effectively, racist, homophobic. There has to be some framework. You can't just have total free speech, otherwise people will be chaos.
Yeah, we've never been in favour of complete free speech. If you target somebody on the basis of their protected characteristic, then of course there should be a consequence to that. But we have laws in place for that. If you target anybody, I don't care who they are, you are wrong to do that. But we cannot have a law that targets individuals who simply express an opinion about the nature of a protected characteristic, about Islam, about transgenderism, about race, about immigration, about borders. You cannot have a police force that makes that type of speech either criminal or the next best thing, a non-crime crime, because that's what's happening.
Harry, the figures are astonishing. 60,000 hours of policing time each and every year. And Lord Hogan Howe, the former head of the Met, saying with obvious justification, this is distracting and preventing coppers from solving actual crimes, real crimes, burglaries, muggings, the sort of stuff that blights lives when people can't... I mean, I see Santa more often in my neighbourhood than I see a copper on the beat.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But there's two things here. One, it is an absolute waste of police time, and the police should be out policing streets and doing those things. But even if all the crime was solved, even if the police were sitting around twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do, there would still be no justification for going out and policing people's free speech. It is a fundamental of a democracy that we are able to say things which upset other people. We are able to challenge ideas. We don't have a blasphemy law in this country. We got rid of blasphemy a long, long time ago. But with this new woke religion, we have, unfortunately, a reintroduction by the back door of a form of blasphemy laws. And that cannot be any good at all. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with the police.
So in the recommendation, in this report out today, the Policy Exchange think tank, Lord Hogan Howe backing up, he said that government needs to step in and end this, because obviously you're telling us that the police and crime commissioners, they love it. For whatever reason, they love this power. So do you have any faith? Well, I know you think that should happen, but do you think it will happen? Do you think that the common sense will prevail and these will be scratched from history?
I don't think it will, because we've already seen the Home Secretary calling for an increase in the use of non-crime hate incidents. This is not a political matter. This is a legal matter. These things have been declared unlawful, in the most part, by the Court of Appeal. It is out of the political arena and it's inside the realm of the law. And the police and the government simply need to get on with obeying the law, Martin.
Harry Miller, founder of Fair Cop, always an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio here in Westminster. Thank you very much. Now, coming up, Nigel Farage has blasted the UK's new national security advisor for jetting to Mauritius to surrender the Chagos Islands before Trump's inauguration. The Reform leader adds, if we treat the USA like this, Can they still regard us as an ally? Or Labour on a collision course with the Trump train? That's coming next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
One of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, you know, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
You have a lot of farms near St. Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:49. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, the government is reportedly looking to fast-track the deal to hand the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius before Donald Trump takes office in January. Now, according to Nigel Farage, the government's national security advisor has even travelled to Mauritius to speed up what he calls the island's surrender before the president-elect's inauguration, who is said to want to stop the deal. And, of course, that'll be around about January the 20th. 30th next year. Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined in the studio by the political correspondent at The Independent, Millie Cook. Millie, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Always a pleasure to have your company. Does Nigel Farage have a point? Or when Barack Obama came to Britain and said that Britain would be at the back of the queue with Brexit, is this a case of foreign interference, nothing to do with Donald Trump, nothing to do with Nigel Farage, or does he have a point? Is this being rushed through?
I mean, first of all, it's mainly just sparking concerns it's being rushed through. There's no evidence yet that it is being fast-tracked. The government sought to push back, saying it's just routine meetings, it's a very standard procedure. However, obviously, that it has sparked fears. Jonathan Powell's flown over there. My sources in Mauritius are saying that it's all moving very quickly, and it's moving quicker than it was before. And if that is the case, that it could spark anger from Donald Trump, because obviously he's quite against the deal. Biden seems to have approved it. We've approved it. But if they kind of seek to do a sort of speedy manoeuvre with the deal and get it over the line before he's inaugurated, that obviously probably would annoy him. Also important to say, though, it's quite hard to do that. His inauguration's in January, so we haven't got much time to get it through.
And the point is, there have been a couple of last-minute foreign policy decisions of some magnitude. We saw with Ukraine, with allowing the firing of missiles deep into Russian territory. Again, Josephine Joe Biden rushing that one through before January. And now this Mauritius deal, and Labour seem very, very happy almost to give away sovereignty. We've had Chagosians in the studio, we've had Chagosians on the show repeatedly who say they don't want that to happen. They don't feel they've been consulted, that they will be under the rule of Mauritius, a country with no sovereign right ever in history to those islands. So do you think if this goes forward, that Donald Trump, when he gets into power, could still upset the apple cart and try and overturn this?
I mean, I can see him definitely doing his best to do it. I've spoken to a lot of people who are from Chagos, who feel really strongly that this deal is just not what they wanted. They feel like they haven't been consulted, and they really argue that they want the territory to remain under British control. So it really has upset a lot of people. I think the main point they keep making is they just weren't included in the conversation at all. And as the deal's progressed, that's even why they're sort of even more angry about it being fast-tracked. They feel like there's just more room for them not to be consulted on something that they feel affects them.
Now, as I've got you here, can I ask you about this petition?
You can.
Everyone in political journalism is talking about 2.2 million signatures now calling for a general election. Now, Millie, you know, as I know, these petitions don't have any legal teeth. They don't have any constitutional teeth. They're an embarrassment. They're an irritant. But Sir Keir Starmer did want a second roll of the dice when he didn't get the result he wanted in 2016. And of course, I'm talking about Brexit. So even though he'll probably just brush this aside and won't act upon it, is it once again maybe highlighting the Prime Minister's hypocrisy?
I mean, the first thing to say is 2 million people is not that many people yet. And also, it's not really how it works with elections. I'm not saying that calling for a second referendum is the right thing to do, but that it could be made that referendums are different to a general election. We have general elections every 5 years, and they happen all the time. There was some argument being made with the referendum that was a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity. And sort of a general election, we have a process for that. We can't just have another general election when a couple of people want it. And 2 million people out of the sort of whole population isn't that many people yet. And also, I think so far, 20,000 of them were from people voting abroad on the petition. So it's hard to tell at the moment. There's not enough regulation on that kind of thing to really say.
And I think it is worth pointing out, as somebody who stood for election as a Brexit Party MEP, 6 million people did sign a petition for a second referendum, and no doubt a lot of people watching this show would have moaned like heck if that would have gone through. So maybe petitions are just a bit of mischief, a bit of fun, and that's the end of that. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. A pleasure to have your company and get your experts' opinions. Political correspondent at The Independent, that is Millie Cook. Thank you. Great stuff. Now it's time for our poll of the day, and it's on that precise topic. Today we are asking, do you want another general election now? 2.2 million people so far on that petition have said yes, and the current results, look at this, an astonishing landslide, the likes of which we don't see in politics, no 52-48 here. The current results are 98% of you say yes, 98% would like a second general election, only 2% say no. Now, the result will be announced later in my show, but I don't suppose, unless there's a miracle or a comet strikes the Earth, that is going to change much. It's proved to be one of the most popular polls we've ever had on GB News, so there's still time to vote. Get stuck in. To do that, you go to gbnews.com/poll. Now, coming up, we'll get all the very latest reaction to the growing calls for Sir Keir Starmer to call that general election. He obviously won't do it, but he did demand that second referendum. As I keep saying, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. There's your weather with Honor.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A mix of clear spells and showers, though some longer spells of persistent rain in parts of northwest Scotland, turning chilly as we head into the overnight period too. Storm Bert, that sits just to the northeast of the country, still continues to bring in some outbreaks of rain across the north and plenty of blustery winds across the country too, with a yellow Met Office rain warning in force across parts of northwest Scotland. Still plenty of blustery showers elsewhere, particularly in western areas, though a few feeding in inland overnight too, particularly across parts of the south where they could be heavy and a little bit blustery at times too. There will still also be plenty of clear skies overnight where it's going to turn chilly with a risk of fog by the time we reach the morning, perhaps even some localised frost in places too. So those showers continuing around coastal areas of Scotland, still quite blustery in parts of northeast Scotland too, but under those clear skies, a risk of frost as well. Still plenty of showers across northern coast of Northern Ireland too and northwest England, and still plenty of those showers feeding into western parts of Wales and England. It's mainly across central and far eastern areas where we'll see those clear skies, those drier spells overnight and that risk of frost by the time we reach the morning. Heading into Tuesday, it's generally a much brighter day for all. Still can't rule out a risk of a shower, particularly once again around northwestern coasts at times, along southern coasts too. But many areas seeing plenty of sunshine, much lighter winds through the day as well. So even though temperatures fairly similar, it's probably going to be feeling like a much more pleasant day on offer. Away from northeastern Scotland, where there's still going to be plenty of blustery showers too. Now into tomorrow evening, we'll begin to start to see a bit of a change. Heavy outbreaks of rain and some blustery winds moving in from the southwest, but to the far north, a clear and cold night on offer with some frost and possibly some icy stretches. And some frost and more fog as we head to the end of the week too. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The M6 both sides, the exit slip road to the M5 southbound closed. Long queues at the scene of a collision around junction 8, the M5, queues on either side. Flooding affecting many parts of the UK, of course, still this afternoon. Bradford and Avon in Wiltshire, Barthford Bridge and St Margaret Street both remain closed off for flooding. An issue still in Hampshire this afternoon. Now, firstly, the southbound M3 around the M27 interchange, that's junction 14. Now, there's a queue back before Eastleigh at 12. A lane closure in place, queues for emergency barrier repairs, and also on the eastbound side of the M27 from junction 4, the M3, up towards junction 5, that's Northampton Airport, is still queuing, a lane still closed off, a 5-vehicle collision there, still causing big delays on the approach. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Of course, we're broadcasting live for you from the very heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, a petition calling for a general election has now amassed over 2.2 million signatures. And one of them was British acting legend Sir Michael Caine. But Keir Starmer, the politician, remember, who campaigned for 3 entire years for a second Brexit referendum, well, he simply brushed it off to one side. Are these petitions powerful, or are they utterly pointless? And we have a breaking news story. At least 17 people, including British nationals, are currently missing after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. We'll bring you the latest news as we get it here on GB News. And as Storm Bert finally blows over, the great clean-up operation begins in earnest, with at least 4 dead, flood damage and commuter chaos. We'll have the latest from our reporters, live from the UK's heaviest hit areas. And Nigel Farage has blasted the UK's new national security advisor for jetting to Mauritius to surrender the Chagos Islands before Donald Trump's inauguration. The Reform leader adds, if we treat the USA like this, then can they still regard us as an ally? Are Labour on a collision course with the Trump train? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. 2.2 million people have signed that petition for a second general election. An astonishing 98% of you GB News viewers would like to see that happen. But let's not forget, these petitions don't really have any legal or constitutional power or teeth. In fact, a petition for a second referendum amassed 6 million signatures back in the day, and no doubt you'd all be a bit miffed if that had happened. But here's the point. Somebody who did want a second election after Brexit, you've guessed it, Sir Keir Starmer. As leader of the opposition then, he was totally unhappy when he didn't get what he wanted with Brexit. In fact, he led the People's Vote campaign to try and destroy the Brexit referendum of 17.4 million actual votes. So, if it's good for the goose, is it good for the gander? If Starmer wanted a second election, then perhaps he should admit we want one right now. Get in touch, let me know your views. gbnews.com/your say. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 4. Well, it's being reported that 2 British tourists, though unconfirmed at this stage, have been rescued, while 2 others are also still missing. That's after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea, off the coast of Egypt. The Foreign Office says it is supporting several British nationals and their families. As I say, we are hearing that 2 British tourists have been arrested, though unconfirmed. The vessel was carrying 31 tourists and 14 crew when it went down near Marsa Alam. The cause of the sinking is unclear, but Egyptian authorities had been warning of high waves at the time. Rescue efforts are now ongoing, led by the Egyptian military and local officials. Here, communities in England and in Wales are beginning a massive clean-up after Storm Bert brought torrential rain, flooding and 80-mile-an-hour winds over the weekend. Hundreds of homes were submerged and roads were turned to rivers, with residents fearing the damage won't be cleared by Christmas. The Environment Secretary says UK flood defences are in the worst condition on record. But Steve Reid did add that the government's pledging £2.4 billion to upgrade them.
Well, I've been kept updated throughout the weekend on the situation that's going on, and I've just come out of an emergency meeting with the Environment Agency. First thing to say is I want to offer my sympathies to everybody who's been affected by these floods, and how devastating it is if your home or your business in particular get affected in this way. But I'd also like to offer my thanks to the emergency services on the ground who have been out there straight away this weekend, making sure people are kept safe.
News just into us in the last hour or so that a man has been arrested after a bomb hoax outside the US Embassy in London. Police were called to Nine Elms last Friday after reports of a suspicious package. It was safely dealt with at the time in a controlled explosion. Daniel Parmenter was arrested 2 days later and officers searched his home. The 43-year-old appeared in court this morning and will stay in custody until his hearing set for next month. Investigators say there's no link to other recent suspicious packages across the country. Kemi Badenoch has pledged to slash red tape and to rewire the economy. That's as she sought to persuade businesses to back the Conservatives. The annual Confederation of Business Industry Conference has been taking place today as business chiefs are uniting to warn Labour that their tax rises will, they say, stunt growth. CBI chief Ray Newton-Smith says firms were caught off guard by the hike in national insurance contributions announced in the Chancellor's recent budget. Ms Badenoch also told the conference that taxes must come down and said risk-takers in business who create jobs should be rewarded.
The new government believes that invisible businesses can absorb these costs, but it is everyday people who bear the brunt, either in higher prices or lower wages, sometimes both. I'm often criticised for talking about capitalism. Someone once told me that capitalism is old-fashioned. I don't think so. I think it is important that we explain what capitalism in a free market environment means. Capitalism is not a dirty word. Wealth is not a dirty word. Profit is not a dirty word. But we need to start explaining how these things deliver for the people out there.
Metropolitan Police says a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after the double shooting taking place in West London. An 8-year-old girl injured in that shooting was in a car with her 2 parents and her 2-year-old sibling when a gunman opened fire. The girl's 34-year-old father has also been left with potentially life-changing injuries. They were both taken to hospital after being shot in Ladbroke Grove just after 5:30 yesterday afternoon. A 32-year-old woman was also taken to hospital as a precaution, but she was not injured. Bar staff will be trained to deal with incidents of drink spiking under government plans to tackle violence against women and girls. Number 10 announced that workers in the nighttime economy will be instructed on how to spot and to prevent cases, as well as help collect evidence under a new pilot programme to be rolled out from December. The plan is for up to 10,000 bar staff across the country to be trained by the spring of next year. Further details have also been discussed at a meeting in Downing Street today between the Prime Minister and Chief Constables, transport bosses and industry executives. Sir Keir Starmer reiterated plans for spiking to become specific offence, with hopes it will give people the confidence, he says, to come forward. And he's also told broadcasters this morning that the number of reported incidents is still way below the number of cases. Meanwhile, the London's Met Police said reports of spiking has increased by 13% in the last year. And just before I hand you back to Martin, Barbara Taylor Bradford, the best-selling novelist who wrote A Woman of Substance, has died at the age of 91. The Leeds-born author who sold more than 90 million books died peacefully at her home yesterday after a short illness. Taylor Bradford was often labelled the Grand Dame of blockbusters and hit the big time when A Woman of Substance was published in 1979, making her, of course, an overnight success. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around half an hour.
Thank you, Sam. Now, many Brits are indicating their anger and growing frustration with the current Labour government by signing a petition calling for another general election. Yes, another one. Despite Brits heading to the polls 5 times in the past 10 years, over 2.2 million people have now signed that petition demanding yet another election, which was launched accusing the Prime Minister of going back on his manifesto commitments. And currently you can see on your screen the petition is now up to almost 2.25 million there, 2.249 million, and the ticker tape is going up by the minute. Almost 2.25 million people now have signed that petition. Well, the Prime Minister said when he was asked about this on ITV this morning, earlier today.
Look, I remind myself that very many people didn't vote Labour at the last election. I'm not surprised that many of them want a rerun. That isn't how our system works. There will be plenty of people who didn't want us in the first place. So, look, what I focus on is the decisions that I have to make.
So there we go, Keir Starmer giving it the brush off. Well, joining me now in the studio is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the studio. So these petitions, they don't have any constitutional power, they don't have any teeth, they are performative, they send a message that, guess what, people who don't like the Labour government would like to vote in a new government. Keir Starmer there, brushing it to one side, but yet my point is this. In 2016, when, as leader of the opposition, he didn't get the result he wanted with the Brexit referendum, Sir Keir Starmer launched a People's Vote campaign for a second referendum. He wanted a second election when he didn't get the result that he wanted. So is there any wonder the electorate are sending the same message to him?
Well, quite, yes. 6 million people signed the petition, saying that Article 50 should be revoked. 4 million of those within 48 hours. It was quite something. But it just... I find the wording of this petition quite entertaining. I would like there to be another general election. Well, sure, many millions of people would like that. Let's face it, Labour did get a huge majority, but a very shallow majority, and there wasn't a massive swing to Labour. It was more a massive swing against the Conservatives, lots of people sitting at home and voting for reform. So they have been quite lucky in getting that majority. But it goes on to say, I believe the current Labour government have gone back on the promises they laid out in the lead up to the last election. And I would say that there's a lot of truth in that, because they promised change, but they also said that there were no plans for tax rises beyond what they'd outlined. And then, lo and behold, they come in, they discover this £22 billion black hole they say they found. And then they say that they have to make £40 billion of tax rises. And because they had ruled out taxes on income tax, national insurance and VAT for ordinary people, they've ended up putting this £25 billion national insurance hit on businesses. And now we see a big, big backlash from that as well, from businesses.
And at the CBI conference earlier on today, I think we're going to go to Rachel Reeves at that shortly. But there's a growing discontentment from the business community because, again, remember, Labour will be the party of business, the party of small business, and some big names now are saying that's not the case. Salman Amin, he's the boss of McVitie's, of the chocolate digestive fame. He has got 350 employees. They've been going since 1830. He says the UK is now uninvestable. So really, that's a comment that takes the biscuit.
What?
Wasn't that funny?
Well, the thing is that they came along and they said it's all about growth and we're going to do things differently. We will get the growth, we'll get the highest growth in the G7. Well, first of all, you can't control what the other 6 countries in the G7 do or do not do with their economies. But patently, these tax rises, these disincentives for businesses, making it harder for business, means, as the CBI are saying today, that they've got less money to invest in new people or in new technology. That's going to have a downward effect on growth. And without growth, it's very, very difficult to see how the Labour government gets itself out of the hole that it is now in, and indeed the hole that the country is in which most of us feel worse off. We feel public services are not working, we're paying more than ever in tax, and we want to see change coming soon. And without growth, it's very hard to see how that happens.
Catherine Forza, excellent as ever. Thank you for joining me in the studio. Let's continue this conversation now, because I'm joined by the former Labour Minister, Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So 2.25 million and rising, a clear message being sent out to the Prime Minister. They've had enough of this Labour government after only 5.5 minutes. And don't forget, Sir Keir Starmer himself, he was the one who wanted a second vote when he didn't get the result he wanted over Brexit. In fact, he led the People's Vote campaign to overturn the democratic vote of 17.4 million Brexiteers. So if he didn't get the result he wanted then, aren't the public entitled to say, well, we didn't get the result we wanted now, and there should be a second general election, Ivor?
No, basically, Martin. It's nice to see you, but the answer to that is no. General elections are dealt with properly by Westminster, by all those involved, and it's very simple. That an election is called by the Prime Minister, as he did this year, and the election then takes place. It's very simple, and that's how we operate in the United Kingdom. And whoever is responsible for this bit of fun, which is what it is, I suppose, I'm afraid that a general election is not permitted, and it's not going to happen. So we can easily forget that. The issue relating it to the Brexit thing is, of course, Brexit was a one-off event. This is not. This is the general election, and it's clearly stated how and when it can happen.
Ivor, that's the exact point. Oh, you know, it was different with Brexit. It was different. And now it's suddenly, no, that's not how we do things in Britain. This is another example of Sir Keir Starmer wanting different rules when he loses.
No, Martin, that's not true. That's not true. He's not running this. So for a start, he doesn't want a general election, and he's not going to have one because the rules don't allow him to do that, unless he really wanted to. But he's not going to do it after 4 or 5 months. Look, there's been a lot of activity.
Well, they might lose.
In trying to start getting things moving in the direction that they want to see. You can't say that after 4.5, 5 months that the government should not be allowed time to actually develop the things that they want to do.
Ivor, you can't...
14 years we spent with that government, the Conservative government, dealing with absolute nonsense all the time.
Ivor, this petition is pointing out... It's pointing out that all of the things that have gone down like a cup of cold stick with the electorate were not in the manifesto. It was not in the manifesto.
Martin, I'm going to take you back very briefly to 1997, when no one knew, except 3 or 4 people, that 6 days after the general election.
Ivor Kaplan, I'm afraid we have to call time. We have to call time because the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has just sat down. She's speaking at the CBI's annual conference. Here's the Chancellor.
You think the media's failed to ask the right question? Feel free to go for it yourself. OK? And then we'll wrap up. So, lots been going on. It's been a busy few months. It's only been 5 months.
Not even 5.
Not even 5 months, which is quite remarkable. Obviously, during particularly the last 2 months, there have been kind of 3 key moments in terms of the big investment summit, where there was a lot of talk about growth and getting that inward investment. There's been the budget, and then obviously recently also your Mansion House speech, where you've talked about pension reform and again about investment in the future of the economy. So when you look at those 3 big set pieces, when you look at them together, what are your reflections on how you've approached it? How well do you think we in the media have understood the messages that have come out of it? And then maybe even more importantly, how is it we and you should measure success coming from those events and those promises and those pledges and those plans?
Well, thank you very much, Keith, and thank you to Rain and the team for inviting me along today to your conference. The first thing that I did as Chancellor in that first week was to announce a number of things that we would be doing to grow the economy. So in the first week, we announced reforms to the planning system, and we called in a number of planning decisions on data centres, on wind farms and on housing. We ended the effective moratorium on onshore wind, and I announced a review of the pensions system to try and unlock that long-term patient capital so that start-up and scale-up businesses can grow and stay in Britain. But also in that first week, I said that we were looking at the public finances and the inheritance that I faced as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I think everybody knows that that inheritance was pretty dire in terms of the black hole in the public finances. And so at the budget in October, I did have to make a number of difficult decisions. But if I hadn't have made those difficult decisions, then we wouldn't have been able to bring the stability back to the economy that is desperately needed. And I sort of think about the people who are here today, and there will be times when you've gone into a business, perhaps as chief executive or as CFO, and you've found that the sums don't really add up and that you need to take quite drastic action to put the company that you work for back on a firm footing. And that's what I did in the budget in October. And we have now drawn a line under the inheritance that I faced. Public finances are now on a firm footing, and also our public services are funded in a proper way. And we've now set the envelope for those public services for the rest of this Parliament, which means we're not going to have to come back for more. And I guess that's the other thing, that in the budget in October, there's sort of three things that I could have done. I could have continued to sort of fiction and try to wipe it under the carpet. I could have said, well, I'll do a bit now to put the public finances on a firm footing, and I'll come back next year and do the rest of it, or I'm going to do it all at once. And again, thinking about the jobs that you do and the businesses that you run, I think all of you are probably most proud of the times when you've actually dealt with the problems you faced, and that you're pleased that you've done that early in the job so that you can then move forward. And that's what I did in the budget in October. Now, look, there's a lot of feedback about the budget, and I expect I'll hear more of it in the room today. I've heard a lot of feedback. What I haven't heard are many alternatives. And we had to put the public finances on a firm footing to bring stability back to the economy. That's what I promised when I was Shadow Chancellor, that I would never play fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do, it's ordinary families and businesses that pay the price. So I've lived up to that promise, returned stability, drawn a line under the fiction in the public finances, put our public finances on a firm footing, which means now that we've got that bedrock of economic stability from which we can begin to grow our economy and return growth and productivity and investment to the economy. And that's why whenever there's been decisions that aren't about making the sums add up, I think you can see that I've always prioritised growth, whether it's on planning, whether it's on pensions reform, whether it's our commitment to reset our relations with the European Union and boost trade, whether it's the plans announced by Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, yesterday to get people back to work. We are determined to grow the economy and to work in partnership with business to do that. So yes, we've had to make some difficult decisions, but that provides the stability and the platform that we need to move forward. But at the same time, through Mansion House, through the Investment Summit, and indeed those decisions I made in my first week as Chancellor, are about beginning to unlock that investment that is vital to turn around the poor productivity and growth performance that we've seen this last decade or so.
So, look, thank you. Come back to the last part of the question. What is it people should be looking for in terms of it starting to work? What are going to be the first signs of it starting to work?
That in the end, you're going to judge us on whether the economy grows. And the economy will only grow if that vital ingredient of investment returns. And our investment performance, both public and private investment as a share of GDP, has lagged behind our competitors over a number of years now. And we need to bring that investment back to Britain. That's why the International Investment Summit was so important. £63 billion of investment into Britain. That investment could go to any country around the world. Investors chose Britain as the place to put that investment, whether it was in new data centres, investments in technology, investments in clean energy, investments in life sciences or creative industries. In a range of sectors, big investors chose Britain at that summit. And I want you to judge this government on our number one mission, which is to bring growth back to the UK economy. We can't do that overnight. If I had promised that during the election campaign, if I promised that in my first couple of months in the job, you'd say that's unrealistic. But over this Parliament, we're going to return investment, we're going to return growth to the economy, because in the end, that's the only way to ensure that Britain is competitive, to ensure that we punch our weight in the world, to improve living standards for working people, and to properly fund the public services that I want to see improved as well.
All right, thank you. So, you've mentioned the budget. You'll read the media, listen to the news. We're in a room full of business leaders, so it's probably quite likely there are a number of people in here thinking in some ways some of the measures announced in the budget are actually going to make it more difficult for growth. How would you respond to that?
I'll come back to that point about the options that I faced. I don't think anyone in this room would deny that there was a big black hole in the public finances. We can see that every month when public finance data is published, that government spending is running well ahead of the forecasts that the Office of Budget Responsibility put out in March this year. And the reason why government spending is running ahead is that the previous government did not put out there in the public domain all of the spending that was happening. And so we had to wipe the slate clean and ensure that our public finances were on a firm footing and that our public services were properly funded. And if I hadn't have done that, I'm afraid that we would have had a return to the instability and the uncertainty that has plagued our economy for far too long. And we saw what happened just a couple of years ago when a government was not honest and realistic about the gap between the money coming in and the money being spent. I'm not going to be that sort of Chancellor. I'm going to be honest and level with people about the scale of the challenges that we face, and also take the action needed to put those problems right. But we've done that now, and businesses can now be certain that we're never going to have to do a budget like that again. We have now got out into the open all the pressures on public finances and on public services, and we've set the spending envelope for the course of this Parliament. So public services now need to live within the means that we've set. That will have to be done through reform. And one thing I will be knocking on the door of many of you about is how we can do reform well in the public sector, because there's not been enough reform these last few years. We're still running public services in the way that you ran your businesses a decade or so ago. We've got a lot to learn from the best innovation in the private sector to reform and improve our public services and get better value for money, frankly, for the taxpayer. But we've done all of that now. And so while the decisions were difficult, I do believe it was better to do all of that in one go rather than to do half a job this year and then leave uncertainty hanging over all of you for another year when I come back for more. I haven't done that. We have now wiped the slate clean. You can be confident that we're not going to have to come back again and do another budget like this. So you can be confident about the tax rates we've set for this Parliament, and public services now need to live within the means that we've set them.
Okay, good, thank you. So, the run-up to the election and after the election, the Labour Party and you and the Prime Minister and others clearly went on a huge big engagement with business and wanted to engage with business. And I've heard you say many times, this is all about being in partnership between government and business. That's how we generate the growth. Okay, budgets by their nature, people end up feeling a budget's been done to them. That's probably just the process of a budget. But coming up, we've got an industrial strategy, we've got a how to unlock investment in infrastructure, we've got labour reform, skills agenda. Those are big opportunities for business and government to work together. So how are you going to ensure that that's seen as a true partnership? What's the best way for people to get involved and engage with you and the rest of the government in those?
Yeah. So first of all, look, it is the nature of budgets that you can't announce or consult in the way over tax rates that you can with other policies. I think the thing that I was proudest of in the budget was what we've been able to do around capital spending because of the fiscal rules that we've set out. The stability rule, so that for the first time this government is committing to balance day-to-day spending through tax receipts. That's incredibly important for me because I don't think you should be borrowing to fund day-to-day costs of running government. But then the investment rule, to get debt down as a share of GDP, but to count the financial assets on the government's balance sheet, not just the costs. So looking at the benefits of investment and not just the costs. And that has unlocked £100 billion additional capital spending during this Parliament that we wouldn't have otherwise have seen. And that will be spending on energy projects, on transport projects, on R&D and technology, and also ensuring that our hospitals and our schools are properly maintained. And if we hadn't have done that, public sector net investment as a share of GDP would have fallen from around 2.5% to 1.6%. And instead, it will stay at those levels of around 2.5% for the duration of this Parliament. I think that of all the things we did in the budget, that has the potential to have the biggest impact on crowding in private investment and improving our infrastructure so that we can compete globally on energy projects, transport projects, and data and technology, and much more besides. But in those other areas, the modern industrial strategy, we've already announced the chair, Claire Barkley from Microsoft. We've been making more announcements about the composition of that Industrial Strategy Council in due course. We are now consulting on the 8 priority areas for the modern industrial strategy. I'm doing that in the Treasury for financial services, but in all of the other areas, whether it's advanced manufacturing, life sciences, the energy sector, we're consulting now ahead of publishing that industrial strategy next year. We are legislation, the second reading of the business rates bill is happening today, but over the course of this year, we'll be consulting over the business rates reform. We were already at this budget able to put in £1.6 billion to stop there being that cliff edge of business rates relief, but we want to make sure that the system is fairer and works well, particularly for retail, hospitality and leisure, and also for our smaller businesses. As I said, Liz Kendall has announced plans to get more people back to work on that, and also on making work pay. We will continue those consultations to make sure that we get the policy right, because I'm a firm believer that whilst government can legislate, it's going to be up to business to make those investments to help grow the economy, and we have to work in partnership. There is no policy that I don't think can't be improved upon through direct contact with business. So in all of those areas, and on the pensions reform, we've got a slot for pensions legislation in the spring next year. We want to work with business to make sure that we get those policies right. So I think I have worked very closely with a large number of you in the almost 5 months that I've been Chancellor of the Exchequer. I had the opportunity for the 3 years that I was Shadow Chancellor to work with many of you before that, but we want to keep that partnership, we want to keep that engagement in government to make sure that we get the policies right so they work for our economy, so that they work for your businesses, so that we can achieve what I think is now a national mission shared between all of us in this room to grow our economy and realise our potential as a country.
Brilliant. Good. So the message is get involved.
Indeed.
Yeah. OK. So we're going to go to media questions.
Yes. If I first take a question from Sue from The Telegraph.
Hi, Sue Chan from The Telegraph. Chancellor, as you and Keith have already alluded to, many businesses are disappointed with your maiden budget. In the CBI President's own words, I think many here are feeling milked. Instead of Labour being on the side of business, haven't you betrayed them with your tax rate? And you said in your remarks that you want to draw a line under everything. Does that mean that going forward there will be no more big tax rises on business?
When I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, I faced a massive hole in the public finances, and we saw what happened in the last Parliament when a government lost control of the public finances, and it was ordinary businesses and families with higher borrowing costs and with that premium for instability who paid the price. I'm not going to be that sort of Chancellor. I faced a problem and I faced into it. And we've now drawn a line under the fiction peddled by the previous government. We've put our public finances back on a firm footing, and we've now set the budgets for public services for the duration of this Parliament. Public services now need to live within their means, because I'm really clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. And that is why, at this budget, we did wipe the slate clean to put public finances and public services on a firm footing And as a result, we won't have to do a budget like this ever again. And indeed, unlike the last government, I will only be doing one budget a year so that this government can focus on what our #1 priority is, and that's growing the economy. I take a question now from Ashley from The Sun.
Hi, thank you, Chancellor. Ashley Armstrong from The Sun. Following on from Sue's comment, I mean, one of the things I've been hearing is that you're very comfortable in the city, Mansion House. You got a great reform, but great reception. But in terms of ordinary, traditional British businesses, which are kind of have the touch point with British customers on a daily basis, they're the ones who notice when the price of a pint goes up or the loaf of bread goes up. They're the big employers, and they're the ones that are being told that actually the cost of hiring and keeping staff is going to be so much more expensive. And you're looking to them for growth. So I guess when you're going for growth, why are you targeting these traditional businesses, which are the big employers and the ones that ordinary Brits use on a daily basis?
Thanks very much for that question, Ashley. I'm not immune to the challenges that business face, including the challenges from higher taxes. But the alternative was instability hanging over us for another year, with people asking, and rightly so, the question, well, how are you going to make your sums add up? The sums now do add up after a number of years when, frankly, they didn't. We've brought out into the light everything that was being covered up by the previous government so that businesses can be confident that we now have our sums adding up. And I'll just also say this, on national insurance contributions, the increase in the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500 means that 1 million small businesses, half of all businesses, are paying either less national insurance or the same national insurance as they were before the budget, because you can now employ more people, have a higher wage bill before you start paying national insurance at all. And those small businesses, therefore, have a chance to grow and to take on more workers. And from April, you'll be able to employ the equivalent of 4 people at the national living wage full-time before you have to pay any national insurance whatsoever. And so this budget did look at how we could support smaller businesses. Now, I do recognise the challenges that businesses will face, but we had to make sure that the sums added up. Otherwise, we would be in a situation where the cost of borrowing would continue at elevated levels rather than the falls in interest rates that we saw the week after the budget, and where businesses would continue to put back investment, not knowing what government's plans were. Everyone now can be certain that we've done what it takes to put our public finances and our public services on a firm footing. I'll take the last question from the media from Joel Hills from ITV.
Hello, Chancellor. I wonder about unintended consequences, talking to some firms, and there's a mix of views I sense from businesses actually about your budget, but it is quite clear that some firms in some sectors do feel they're exposed in perhaps a way that you didn't intend. The CBI says that it surveyed businesses and half of them plan to let workers go as a result of your budget. Will you rethink any of the measures that you've announced?
It's really important that the sums add up, and I'm determined to be the Chancellor that puts our public finances on a firm footing after all the instability that we've faced these last few years. We've made our decisions. I've had lots of feedback on the budget, but what I haven't heard is any credible alternatives to what I did to put our public finances on a firm footing. And if you take the measures in the budget in the round, the Office for Budget Responsibility say that unemployment falls, employment levels rise, wages rise, real household disposable incomes increase over the course of this Parliament. So if you take the measures that I set out in the budget in the round, it's good for jobs and it's good for growth.
Good. Perfect. Right. Thank you. Now, if you think myself and the media have missed the key issues altogether, please, this is your opportunity now. So we'll have a question here.
Sorry, one more from the media, Sky News. Chancellor, you say you won't be coming back for more, that the spending envelope has been set, but under your current plans, some departments after this year will experience real terms cuts to their budget. So are you fine with that?
Well, first of all, you can't be in a position to say that because we haven't set departmental budgets for beyond 25-26, as you know. We'll be doing that in the second phase of the spending review, and work will get going soon on that, and we'll be publishing the second phase of the spending review in spring next year. But what I am really clear about, and I've said it already a couple of times today, that public services now need to live within the envelope that we've set. We will not be coming back to top up those budgets. We have set the envelope for public spending, and it's through reform and through economic growth that we need to be able to properly fund our public services and to improve living standards for ordinary families.
Good. Now all the media are going to behave themselves and not stick their hands up. Fine. We have a question just here.
Thank you. Jo Bibby from the Health Foundation. We're concerned with the impact of poor working age health on productivity and growth. There's 2.8 million people out of work on health grounds. There's 3.8 million people in work with poor health. So you've talked about wanting to boost growth, but without addressing this working age health challenge, it's going to be a struggle. And we see time and again how the investment we need in prevention gets squeezed by the acute spending demands. So I'm interested, do you think this is a time to start now looking at different rules for prevention spending as a government, as you do for capital, and what incentives can you give employers to put worker health at the top of their agenda?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Jo. And I hope you can see from the work that we're doing across government in Department of Health and Social Care, Work and Pensions, and also in education, that we are a government that's trying to be joined up and tackle some of these deep-rooted challenges that we face. Included in the budget was £22.6 billion for health spending, including money to get those waiting lists down, because there are many people of all ages who are on health waiting lists and as a result aren't available for work, and we need to get those people off waiting lists and back into work, as well as tackling the big challenge we face in mental health, which is keeping many people out of the workplace. And that's why the white paper that we'll be publishing to get Britain working will be across work and pensions, skills and health. So for the first time, to have a joined up piece of work that addresses the myriad reasons for that rising sickness bill, and taking a cross-government approach to help people stay in the workplace, as you rightly say, but also help people get back to work through both skills and health interventions to make that possible.
Perfect. We've got a question over here.
Thank you. Natasha Thomas from Sage, a UK FTSE technology company. We welcome the announcement in the budget that the government's National Technology Advisor is now going to move ahead and lead a review on barriers to adopting technology. So will the government take this opportunity now to move quickly towards a really ambitious strategy for the UK to become a highly digitalised economy? So, for example, setting targets for cloud and AI adoption, but also aligning with Asia and Europe to move towards e-invoicing, which leads to faster payment, better access to finance, and ultimately actually easier sustainability reporting for UK SMEs.
Thank you very much for that question, Natasha. Peter Kyle at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology is leading this work. And there's three key strands to it. The first of all is about attracting those firms that are at the cutting edge of technology to Britain. And that's why at the International Investment Summit in October, we were so pleased to announce significant investment, for example, in data centres and in the tech space, because we want that cutting edge investment here in Britain. And it's brilliant that Demis Hassabis is going to be getting the Nobel Prize, I think, next week for the work that he's done at DeepMind. And keeping DeepMind in Britain has been absolutely crucial for creating that sort of ecosystem for those high-tech sectors. The second thing, which is what you touched upon, is about diffusion of technology through the wider economy. And I'll just come back to that in a second. But the third is about how we can use technology and AI better in public services. And I'm really determined to do this, because one of the things that's really frustrated me in the first few months in this job is that if we want to tackle fraud in the welfare system, or indeed in HMRC, then I'm told we've got to put a load more money in to have people who are manually chasing up these cases, rather than investing in technology, which is, I expect, what many of your businesses do, to root out that fraud. And we need, as a government, to be doing much more to embrace cutting-edge technologies, to improve the service that we deliver to the customers of government services, but also to reduce the costs. And as I said earlier, there's a huge amount that I want to learn from business to do that, because frankly, government is behind the curve when it comes to this. But the point that you make is absolutely crucial for driving up productivity through the wider economy, because we see technology everywhere, but we don't seem to see it in the productivity numbers. And that is because, and Andy Haldane has sort of set this out really well, both when he was chief economist at the Bank of England and since when he's been at the RSA, that we've got this long tail of businesses with low productivity. And if we can spread that diffusion of technology, which I know that's something that Sage, with the work that you do with small businesses, is absolutely keyed into, if we can do that, we have a chance of lifting both our productivity performance and therefore our growth numbers, but also, crucially, the incomes of working people. And I want to work with businesses like Sage to do that. And I know that Peter Kyle and Matt Clifford and Patrick Vallance and others in government are really determined to make sure that not only are we attracting businesses at the frontier of technology, but we're also diffusing that technology, as you say, Natasha, through the wider economy.
Right, fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up in just a minute. We're going to just finish on my favourite topic, which is optimism, as you know. Okay, being a Scotland fan, you have to be optimistic in life. Otherwise, it's just not worthwhile living. So, you've done the difficult stuff. You've done the budget. You've taken the hard decisions. You've faced up to the criticism. But what's really, really important, I always think, for the future, for the economy, for growth, for investment, for business, is optimism and having confidence, because investment will flow in the back of confidence. So when you look at where we are now, what's your sort of grounds for optimism and grounds for a confident future?
So I'm hugely optimistic about Britain and our potential to grow and bring good jobs paying decent wages here, and for us to be increasingly competitive on the global stage. We've got so much going for us as a country, whether it's our cutting-edge industries in life sciences, technology, our brilliant universities and entrepreneurs. But we all know, and this sort of builds on Natasha's point, that we need to see that cutting-edge innovation really run through our whole economy, through businesses big and small. And government has got to play its part, but it's only one part, and a small part compared to the heavy lifting that businesses need to do. But what government can do is to create the conditions to encourage that business investment. First of all, that's providing that rock of stability so that businesses can look to the future with confidence, knowing that the rules of the game have been set, and they now have been. But also the work that we can do to remove those barriers that are stopping you from investing. Whether it's because it takes too long to get things through the planning system, whether it's because as an entrepreneur, you find it much easier to raise finance in the US than you do in the UK, and so you gradually shift towards the US rather than listing and keeping your intellectual property here in the UK. Whether it is struggling to access the skills, either because, as Joe says, there are too many people trapped out of work because of sickness and ill health, or because we're not open enough to global talent from around the world. And it's my job as Chancellor to really corral the whole of government to be thinking every day about what we can do to remove the barriers that stop investment or delay investment into Britain. And whether it's the announcements that I made in my first week as Chancellor on planning and pensions, whether it is the £63 billion that we brought in at the International Investment Summit, whether it's the Mansion House speech and regulating for growth, not just regulating for risk, or indeed whether it's what we did at the budget in returning stability to the economy, this government have already got started in less than 5 months to do the things that I know are necessary for unlocking growth. And I want to work with all of you to fulfil our potential as a country to make this the best place to start a business, to grow a business and to invest in. And together, working together, I know that we can do just that.
Brilliant. Thank you. thank you again for coming along, and if we could all join in saying thank you to the Chancellor.
Okay, that was Rachel Reeves there, the Chancellor, giving a speech at the Confederation of British Industries there. And let's just go through a few things of what she said. Let's play a game of word bingo, the phrases she used the most. The top was firm foundations or footing, used 8 times. Wiping the slate clean, that was used 5 times. The sums now add up 4 times. And, of course, the financial black hole 3 times. The key messages, she said, I'm hugely optimistic for the future of Britain. She said the sums do add up, and I haven't heard any alternatives from my critics, saying there's a lot of criticism, but no alternatives offered. And she faced, it has to be said, some pretty brutal cross-examination, not only from journalists, but also from business representatives. And the one that said, the Telegraph, saying the businesses feel milked. That's what the CBI said, disappointed, betrayed. Another one saying half of businesses plan to let staff go. And the final one was that there is not a great deal of optimism amongst the business community. So a rather bruising cross-examination there, I felt. Let's get some reaction now from the former Labour Minister, Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, welcome back to the show. It was a fairly testing environment for the Chancellor. She was perspiring gently, looks like a bit of a rabbit in headlights at times. Fix the foundations, get the country ready for growth is what she said, but it doesn't seem that the business community has been entirely responsive to that message thus far, Ivan.
No, look, it's 5 months, and I think Rachel has been doing an incredibly difficult job from, the day of the election to where we are today. And I think what she tried to lay out in that speech was all about what you can do in a future. It's not about what we've done in the past. It's about what you can do in the future. And that future is going to be, trying to use all the capabilities that we've got. There is no indication that this is going to be the wrong thing to do. And as one of the most important things I think she said is that while people have criticised, and of course people are entitled to criticise the government, and that's fair enough, but the criticism is not shared by people coming with new ideas. And I think that's a critical thing. She has worked all this out over this last few months, and it's absolutely what she feels will take us to the future. And I think we have to give this the time. We did always give chancellors the time. And I was briefly going to say, before we cut away, was about 97 when we announced 6 days after the election that the Bank of England was going to be independent. Now, that wasn't in a manifesto, ever. Never has been. But it's been supported.
You can't compare that to cutting winter fuel allowance or an inheritance tax rate on farmers. There's something completely different. Let's stay on point to where we are today if we can, Ivor.
Okay.
It's all about making the foundations for growth, encouraging businesses. And yet we heard there that 50% of businesses are now looking to cut back on staff because guess what? If you increase the national insurance contributions for employers, stands to reason they'll take less employees on or give smaller pay rises. Mac Vities today, the biscuit baron, saying that the UK is becoming uninvestable. These are big corporations that have been in this country for the best part of 2 centuries, saying that Rachel Reeves's budget does not foster growth. They're the businesses on the ground. They're saying that, frankly, Rachel Reeves's numbers don't add up.
Well, I quite like McVitie's business. I don't know about biscuits. I don't know about anyone else. But, for goodness sake, this company has been here, I don't know when, since 1800 or something like that. It's been here for 100, 200 years. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's entitled for the chief exec to say, I would like to see things moving in a slightly different direction. That's right for him, but it's also right for him and other people to say, well, let's see what happens as we head towards next year and what that will bring in the budgets. you know, in the budget, to the main budget, but also what happens from different companies. I can't see Britain suddenly changing.
Well, don't you think, Ivor, you could have given, again, a biscuit bun, a few crumbs of comfort, for example, by lowering taxation, by lowering the burdens on companies to hire, by lowering income tax, corporation tax, stimulate growth through tax cuts, not tax rises?
Well, there was always going to be some way, I'm speaking for Rachel here, but there's always going to be some way of dealing with what you inherit. That's not unfamiliar. That's happened before, and it will probably happen again in the future. But what you want to do is to create a budget that can take you into the whole 5-year period. And that's what the government is trying to do. That's what it's been setting itself to do. And I think from looking at it myself, I think there's a satisfaction as to where we are. I'm not just talking about whether it says there's stuff you've got to go through because of budgets and all that sort of thing. The key is, can we bring this right over the next 4 years? I think Labour will do that.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thanks for your opinion. And thanks for hanging on to come back for part 2. Former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, coming up, we'll get all the very latest reaction to those growing calls for Keir Starmer to call another general election. He obviously won't do that, but then again, he did want a second referendum on Brexit. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather, and here's Honor.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A mix of clear spells and showers, though some longer spells of persistent rain in parts of northwest Scotland, turning chilly as we head into the overnight period too. Storm Bert, that sits just to the northeast of the country, still continues to bring in some outbreaks of rain across the north and plenty of blustery winds across the country too, with a yellow Met Office rain warning in force across parts of northwest Scotland. Still plenty of blustery showers elsewhere, particularly in western areas. There are a few feeding in inland overnight too, particularly across parts of the south where they could be heavy and a little bit blustery at times too. There will still also be plenty of clear skies overnight where it's going to turn chilly with a risk of fog by the time we reach the morning, perhaps even some localised frost in places too. So those showers continuing around coastal areas of Scotland, still quite blustery in parts of northeast Scotland too, but under those clear skies a risk of frost as well. Still plenty of showers across northern coast of Northern Ireland too and northwest England, and still plenty of those showers feeding into western parts of Wales and England. It's mainly across central and far eastern areas where we'll see those clear skies, those drier spells overnight and that risk of frost by the time we reach the morning. Heading into Tuesday, it's generally a much brighter day for all. Still can't rule out a risk of a shower, particularly once again around northwestern coasts at times, along southern coasts too. But many areas seeing plenty of sunshine, much lighter winds through the day as well. So even though temperatures fairly similar, it's probably going to be feeling like a much more pleasant day on offer. Away from northeastern Scotland, where there's still going to be plenty of blustery showers too. Now into tomorrow evening, we'll begin to start to see a bit of a change. Heavy outbreaks of rain and some blustery winds moving in from the southwest, but to the far north, a clear and cold night on offer with some frost and possibly some icy stretches. And some frost and more fog as we head to the end of the week too. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Edinburgh, the southbound M90 at Queensferry 1A. Now the exit slip coming off there. There's a breakdown, it's slow and part blocked. There's one as well affecting the northbound M1 at Rotherham at 35, a lane shut and it's slow. And a breakdown northbound M6 from Middlewich 18 up to Knutsford 19 causing queues, again a lane shut. Stop start southbound M6 towards the M5, tailing back to Wednesbury at junction 9. It follows an earlier collision there. Now the clockwise M25, the entry slip coming on at the M23 at junction 7. There's a broken down car, so big queues forming. That's currently partially blocked. And there's queues southbound for the M3 in Hampshire still. Emergency barrier repairs continue at junction 14, the M27 interchange. There's a lane shut, queuing before Eastleigh at 12.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements? Or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a very, very happy Monday. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. On today's show, a petition calling for a general election has amassed now almost 2.3 million signatures. It's going up by the second, and one of them was even the British acting legend, Sir Michael Caine. But Sir Keir Starmer, the politician, remember, who campaigned for 3 entire years for a second Brexit referendum, well, he's simply brushed it all off. Are these petitions powerful or are they pointless? And Rachel Reeves's autumn budget was partly responsible for that petition, and after going back on manifesto commitments, the Chancellor has defended her tax rises this afternoon at the CBI while addressing business leaders on this very show a short while ago. We'll have full analysis of that. And at least 17 people, including British nationals, are missing after a tourist yacht sank in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. We'll bring the latest news as we get it on this developing story. And a children's book called Usborne Book About Refugees has been slammed for indoctrinating young minds. It urges young people to say that refugees are welcome and claims that refugees enrich our countries. And while we're at it, write to your MP to get more refugees coming to Britain. Is it a fair point or is it woke propaganda? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, addressed the CBI a short while ago. And for a bit of fun, I played some bingo. Guess what? Firm foundations or a firm footing. 8 times that was mentioned. We've wiped the slate clean 5 times. The sums add up 4 times. And, of course, the black hole. Where would we be without the black hole? 3 times. But I've got to say, facing some very hostile questioning from the media and businesses who don't seem to think that the figures add up. And one blinding fact pointed out to the Chancellor by the business community at the CBI is that half of British businesses are now thinking about cutting back on staff thanks to the Chancellor's budget. So the question is, do the sums add up? Or actually, has this budget been a disaster? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now, before we go any further, here's your headlines. It's that man, it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and a very good evening to you. Just after 5 o'clock, well, we'll start with the latest update on the situation in Egypt, where we're now hearing reports that 2 British tourists have been rescued and 2 are still missing after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. The Foreign Office here says it is supporting several British nationals and their families. That vessel was carrying 31 tourists and 14 crew when it went down near Marsa Alam. The cause of the sinking is unclear at this stage, but authorities in Egypt had been warning of high waves. Rescue efforts are ongoing, being led by the military there and local officials. We understand that so far more than 28 people have been rescued. Here, meanwhile, a major incident has been declared in Northamptonshire after heavy rain has triggered more severe flooding across the country. Billing Aquadrome Holiday Park is at the centre of that crisis, with around 1,000 residents affected and some still stranded in an area being cut off by floodwaters. Emergency teams, including fire and police services, are currently rescuing some people by boat and say they expect their operations to continue throughout this evening. Meanwhile, the Environment Secretary has said UK flood defences are in the worst condition on record. But Steve Reed says the government's pledging £2.4 billion in upgrades.
Well, I've been kept updated throughout the weekend on the situation that's going on, and I've just come out of an emergency meeting with the Environment Agency. First thing to say is I want to offer my sympathies to everybody who's been affected by these floods and how devastating it is if your home or your business in particular get affected in this way. But I'd also like to offer my thanks to the emergency services on the ground who have been out there straight away this weekend, making sure people are kept safe.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has defended her budget today, telling business leaders it's brought stability to the economy, she said. Speaking at the CBI conference, she said difficult decisions were needed to draw a line under the inheritance from the previous Conservative government. She also ruled out any further borrowing or tax hikes, saying public services must now live within their means. She also dismissed calls for big tax rises on businesses, saying the economy is now on a firm footing.
We have now drawn a line under the inheritance that I faced. Public finances are now on a firm footing, and also our public services are funded in a proper way. And we've now set the envelope for those public services for the rest of this Parliament, which means we're not going to have to come back for more.
Rachel Reeves there speaking earlier. Well, a man has been arrested after a bomb hoax outside the US Embassy in London. Police were called to Nine Elms last Friday after reports of a suspicious package there, though it was safely dealt with a controlled explosion taking place. Daniel Parmenter, was arrested 2 days later, and officers searched his home. The 43-year-old appeared in court this morning and will stay in custody until his next hearing next month. Investigators say, though, there is no link to any other recent suspicious packages found. Police say an 8-year-old girl who was injured in a double shooting was in a car at the time with her parents and her 2-year-old sibling when a gunman opened fire. The Metropolitan Police have now revealed that a 22-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. That's after the double shooting took place in the west of the capital. The girl's 34-year-old father was also left with potentially life-changing injuries. And the girl was undergoing surgery, though she's now in a stable condition. The pair were both taken to hospital after that shooting in Ladbroke Grove just after 5:30 yesterday. And if you've been eagerly awaiting the annual presidential turkey pardon, well, Peach and Blossom, they're both safe for the holidays. Don't ask me what on earth this means. The turkeys from Minnesota travelled to DC and even stayed in style at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel. Their pardoning by President Biden is a White House tradition, complete with puns from the president, and kicks off the countdown to Thanksgiving. That White House tradition dates back to Abraham Lincoln in 1836. And if you're really interested, you can catch it all live on the live stream. Peach and Blossom. That's the latest from me. I'll hand you straight back now to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now then, many Brits are indicating their anger and frustration with the current Labour government by signing a petition calling for another general election. Despite Brits heading to the poll 5 times in the last 10 years, over 2 million, in fact, I think now it's about 2.3 million people have signed this petition, only launched on Wednesday, demanding yet another election, and that was launched accusing the Prime Minister. There it is, 2.29 million. So, yeah, just nudging towards 2.3 mil. And this one is accusing the Prime Minister of going back on his manifesto commitments. As you can see on your screen there, that ticker tape going up in real time, currently just shy the 2.3 million mark. Well, here's what the Prime Minister said earlier on today when asked about his petition on ITV this morning.
Look, I remind myself that very many people didn't vote Labour at the last election. I'm not surprised that many of them want a rerun. That isn't how our system works. There will be plenty of people who didn't want us in the first place. So, look, what I focus on is the decisions that I have to make.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So there we have it. We don't play by those rules here in Britain. We don't have second elections when we don't get the results we want, except, of course, the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. He wanted a second vote when he got the wrong result on the Brexit referendum. In fact, he led the People's Vote campaign to reverse Brexit for 3 solid years. But, Chris, can we turn now to what's just happened in the room behind you there? Rachel Reeves gave a speech to the CBI, and I've got to say, I think she looked very startled. I think she got a very tough ride from journalists from the room. She was cross-examined, and she kept saying the sums now do add up. But Chris Hope, I don't think many people in that room agreed. You were there. Tell us more.
Yeah, hi Martin, welcome to the CBI conference. It's wrapping up now, the first annual conference here for the CBI for several years because of issues I've had within the organisation, which we won't go into here. But this is normally the CBI becomes more influential in a majority Labour government because business needs someone to fight for their corner. And I've been to, going back 3 decades, meetings of the CBI, the annual conference. I haven't been to many more awkward sessions than that. So there was a single solitary clap for Rachel Reeves. She kept saying over and over again, we will never have to do a budget like that again. I mean, it couldn't have gone, it was heard in complete silence, but barely anyone did anything. It wasn't one of, I cast my mind back to the meeting at the Oval when business leaders were all over the place as part of this government, as part of this attempt to get close to them, the so-called scrambled eggs and smoked salmon offensive. That goodwill has just completely disappeared. I mean, that meeting felt awkward, it felt silent. It couldn't have gone any worse. Maybe if there was some boos or slow hand clapping, but I've been to a lot of those meetings. It felt very, very awkward for the Chancellor. She kept saying over and over again to them, we won't have to do any of this again, or another budget like that. She said that she made clear she wanted them help with learning the lessons of business in reforming public services. She said many of our services are 10 years behind where companies are. But I was struck by the quietness, the indifference almost with which the audience listened to the Chancellor.
I remember the days, and you will too, of Theresa May when she knew, I think she got it wrong on Brexit. She just kept repeating sound bites, and the repetition of sound bites is an indication, is it not, of the fact you're kind of startled, you don't know what to do. And I kept a note of Rachel Reeves during that speech, Chris, because the sound bites were being repeated thick and fast. Firm foundations, firm footing, 8 mentions, wiping the slate clean, 5 mentions, the sums add up, 4 mentions, and of course the omnipresent black hole 3 times. And looking close on the monitor, Chris, I think she looked really, really uncomfortable, nervous, startled. Yeah. I think, to use a football term, she had a mare.
Well, I think it was a tough audience for her because most of the £40 billion they've raised in that budget 4 weeks ago has gone on businesses. Many of the employers here are worried about how they're going to employ more people, the increase on employers' national insurance. So there's obviously issues for inheritance tax for farmers. There's concerns about the employee rights. come forward with Angela Rayner. I thought the one point that cut through on a positive for Rachel Reeves was this. She said, I've heard a lot of feedback about the budget. What I have not heard of is any alternative. And in fact, when we heard earlier from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, she also had no options. When she was asked directly, would you reverse the employers' national insurance increase, she wouldn't say yes to that either. So if you believe the numbers, and the OBR has supported this idea, there was a black hole in the accounts left by the Tory party, this is Labour's solution. The problem was most of that was borne down on the audience in that room, and that's why I felt they were less than happy.
And Chris Hope, the questions from the media and from business, they were using phrases like business is disappointed. The CBI was saying they felt milked and betrayed by the Labour Party. And then another one was ITV said this is the budget of unintended consequences. They were saying half of businesses are planning to let staff go, and they were talking all the time about a lack of confidence coming from the business community. This was meant to be Labour's pledge to the business community. We're the party of business, as they said, and instead it fell on very, very stony ground.
Well, it really did. I'm not sure where they can go from here. Now, what Rachel Reeves wants to happen is to get employers back on her side, but they are very, very bruised here. That room was awkward. There was no applause apart from a single hand clap at some point, and no one else followed up with, no one else joined in the applause. It felt very, very difficult. There's a huge amount of work here. I thought Rachel Reeves looked nervous. It's not easy doing a Q&A. You're not doing a speech where you have prepared remarks you read out. You're doing a Q&A. You're not sure what the questions will be and what you'll be asked next. And I felt that she tried to take it on head on, to her credit, by saying, I had little choice, I had to do something, and it won't happen again. But the question is, if growth doesn't get going, if this gamble fails, the big concern in that room and behind me, as CBI members disappear into the London evening, is will it happen again? Because after the manifesto said no increase in national insurance, that didn't include employers, even though many thought it did do at the time. So big concerns here, I think, about whether the government will have to do all this again in a few years' time.
And Chris Hope, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, ended by saying, I'm hugely optimistic for the future. We've got so much to offer. And Chris Hope, you're dead right. Rather than a huge round of applause, it was practically enter stage left from the tumbleweed. Chris Hope, what an afternoon for the Chancellor. Thank you very, very much for joining us from the CBI there. That's our political editor, Chris Hope. Now joining us in studio to go over that is a former Conservative advisor, Charlie Rowley. Charlie, welcome to the studio. You heard the speech, you heard the reaction there. I've got to say, I thought that was a bad day at the office of Rachel Reeves. She didn't get any of the applause, any of the plaudits she was expecting. As you just heard, she looks completely and utterly startled.
I think that's right, and I think she's on very, very thin ice now, because when you go through a whole election campaign trying to court business, making sure that you are the incoming, or wanting to be the incoming government that puts itself on the growth footing, that's your message throughout, all the while saying we're not going to raise national insurance, VAT or national insurance contributions, and then to do all of those things, certainly in terms of raising NICs, and to address those business people, those are the growth, those are the drivers of growth in this country. So having courted them all and to say that I'm not going to put up your taxes, to then hit them hard at her first budget, I think is a bit of a slap in the face for those people in that room. They won't be very happy about that. To then say also, part of that speech, you're absolutely right, we won't have to do this again. Well, let's just take a step back, because if you choke off the growth that you only get from those people in the room, from the businesses, from those that are the employers in this country, the innovators, the drivers, the entrepreneurs, choke off that growth, then you're going to have to, with all the commitments that she spent in terms of public sector pay rises and increases and reforms along the way, that's going to have to come from somewhere. So she's going to either have to cancel those projects in the long term, she's going to either then have to increase taxes on working people, something she said she wasn't going to do. This is turning into a disaster for the Chancellor.
And Charlie, one of the really damning statements that was read out by a journalist was that half of the businesses plan to let staff go. This is the CBI. This is the home of business. It's the first big speech after the first budget of this term. That's pretty much the nightmare you don't want to hear. And what was Worth pointing out, though, she did have a point, I felt, when she said, I haven't heard any alternatives yet. Kemi Badenoch, of course, addressed the CBI earlier on today. I know you heard that speech. Kemi saying that Labour are doubling down on the mistakes we made. Again, it's hardly inspiring stuff. What about offering some policies? What about offering something optimistic, growth-driven, low tax? Come and vote for the Conservative Party. But there weren't really any policies or ideas laid down by Kemi Badenoch earlier on today either.
Well, what is so frustrating as a Conservative, and I'm sure Kemi will feel this too, is that, in the last general election, the Conservatives went into that election wanting to cut tax and wanting to grow the economy as well, but by cutting red tape, cutting tax, allowing the economy to grow, and that pays for the public services that we all know we're in a bit of a broken state post-COVID. So a lot of work needs to be done. There's no doubt about that. But this is a political choice. Labour have decided to increase public sector pay. They've decided to adhere to the demands of their union bosses. They've gone after business to increase their taxes, to pay for all of the things that they're saying that they need to pay for, and this black hole, which I think is somewhat disputed and still is. If you speak to the IFS, they'll say that it's not as bad as what the Labour Party are pointing out. And so I understand. So that is frustrating for me, because it could have been an alternative, but the Conservatives had obviously lost the support of the public because of all the decisions it made in the past. But that is why you're seeing that petition as well to get another general election, because people did not vote for this. They didn't expect this from a Labour government, and they don't want it anymore.
Charlie, as a political advisor yourself, you've written speeches. One thing that's really leaping out is the repetition of sound bites. It's like, my dad was a toolmaker. People in the Amazonian rainforest know that Sir Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker, right? And now it's the financial black hole. 14 years of chaos. We're on a firm foundation, wiping the slate clean. The sums add up. Don't you think people are just getting a bit tired now, this endless repetition? It's back to the Brexit means Brexit days. It's like, stop repeating sound bites and start giving us some optimism.
Yes, it's a fine balance, because you've got to repeat something enough times in order for the public to then start to hear it. But what they have also got to remember is that the public have got to believe it. And if you start saying time after time, the sums add up, we're not going to have to do this again, all the while knowing that the sums don't add up, knowing when you're taking winter fuel away from pensioners, when you're seeing protests in Whitehall because of farmers, family farmers, that are going to lose out, where there may not be food on the shelves if they feel as though they cannot farm their land anymore to provide that food and stock. People are going to see that the sums don't add up. They're going to see that actually what the government is saying isn't true. They don't believe it. And that's why you've got to be careful when you do come up with a soundbite. Taking back control, for example, brilliant one, because people wanted that and they felt that wasn't, that Brexit wasn't working for them, or the EU wasn't working for them. That's why they voted for Brexit. So soundbites do work if the government actually follows through with it, if they're actually doing what they say they're going to do, if they're actually telling the truth. And I fear as though the Chancellor is on a very sticky wicket now, and I think it's only going to be bad news over Christmas, New Year and into 2025.
Charlie Rowley, excellent as ever. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio here in Westminster. Great stuff. Now, coming up, a children's book called The Usborne Book about refugees has been slammed for indoctrinating young minds. It urges young people to say refugees are welcome and claims that refugees enrich our countries. And while you're at it, write to your MP and get more refugees into Britain. Is it a fair point, or is this woke propaganda? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Love a bit of baking and share some hot tips. We're delighted to be joined by our baking extraordinaire, Matty Edgell, who won Great British Bake Off last year. Woo! Welcome. Congratulations as well. I'm sure you're sick of being congratulated.
And there's a nice reminder.
No, you like all the glory.
Yeah.
What was it like winning the Great British Bake Off? What's last year been like for you?
Winning I was not expecting to win. At any point until they said my name.
You're a very humble
nice
guy.
Surprise. No, I was just
really
in touch with reality. I wasn't. Was
it quite a close race throughout then?
Yeah, I considered myself the underdog throughout. I think the first week I turned around after the showstopper and kind of saw how good everyone was, and then looked at mine and thought, how have I got here? And that kind of theme followed through.
But then that surely
like an underdog.
On.
Yeah,
but,
it did.
Actually, I'm going to get better throughout this.
Yeah, I think it made me kind of like really tune into the feedback that they was giving me and trying to embed that throughout. So that's probably why.
Could you feel yourself improving as the series went on?
Definitely, and I think also, like, kind of simultaneously, my confidence improved at the same time, and then that, like, little bit of belief in myself probably helped out as well.
What was your strength? Biscuits, cake, bread?
I think cake's my strength. Cake. I think cake, typically, if you start baking, that's probably where you start, isn't it? So that was what I knew most.
How did you start baking?
I've been asked this so many times since...
You don't know?
I attribute it to my nan.
Oh,
but, yeah, I would say... I think most people probably attribute it to like a grandparent or something that they maybe done with like their parents when they was growing up. So that's I'll give it to my nan.
Or the major lockdown baking boom.
Yeah, banana bread.
Everybody,
all over the place, isn't it? It's good.
Yeah, it is really good. I love a banana bread, even now.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24 and I've just been told it's party time. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a children's book by Usborne aimed at ages 7 and up. Yeah, that's right, junior school kids. Has sparked controversy for teaching that refugees enrich our country and, of course, drive growth. Distributed to schools and libraries, the book includes teaching resources, encouraging children to even write to their local MPs about refugee support and actually asking for more refugees to be allowed into Britain. Critics, including Reform MP Rupert Lowe, have labelled the material as indoctrination, calling for greater scrutiny of classroom content. And joining me now in the studio to discuss this is the founder of the New Culture Forum, and that's Peter Whittle. Peter, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Martin.
As it's always a delight to have you. And you messaged me very, very early about this. You were quick out of the blocks this morning. It caught your eye, and it's fair to say it made you rise onto your haunches. Tell me why.
Well, yeah, because this particular one about refugees is so blatant. I mean, we've spoken before about the general indoctrination that's happening in schools, critical race theory, gender ideology. This is a book aimed, as you said, at primary school age. Right, so it's like get them young. Yes? And it's basically entirely, the whole point of the book is, refugees welcome. That's it. That's what sort of you can sum it up as. So, as you say, it says that it gives children guidance as to how they might write to their MPs. It says sort of things like, you've got to make sure you know about the benefits of food and different cuisines and this sort of thing, totally ignoring this catastrophic crisis that we actually have at the moment. It doesn't sort of ask people to look at all the other things that maybe refugees bring with them, not least of all a $5 billion bill in accommodation in hotels at the moment, and also, for that matter, great rise in crime, and also some pretty sort of practices which are pretty sort of alien to our society. All of that is swept aside. This is all about basically, it's absolutely right to invite anyone and to take anyone, and it's aimed at kids, right? Terrible.
Now, Peter Whittle, of course, refugees can bring great richness and benefits to our society if it's in the right way and the right numbers. And I think a lot of people would like to point that out. But what I think was curious about this book is that, for example, on the front page, I counted like 27 individuals. I think almost all of them are children. Hardly any of them are adult males, and a vast majority of them are women. So it paints this romanticised vision of refugees. And of course, people fleeing wars should be given, support and solace in our country. We've historically been supportive when the time is right, for example, in Ukraine. But this book doesn't give any counter-argument. It paints this entire thing as rosy and peachy.
Yes, exactly. But also, look, they're talking about refugees. What we're seeing at the moment, what is it already this year? 40,000 or whatever it is this year. These people are economic migrants, right? They're not refugees. Not
all of them.
Well, frankly, the vast bulk, I think, are. The fact is this country takes far more refugees than most other European countries. But the point really is more this, actually, Martin, and that is that, this is sort of like shaping up people who will eventually, they'll go on to university and they eventually will vote, right? It's supported by something called the Refugee Council, which I think we can assume what their view generally on this issue is. And then also, for that matter, it's partly supported by the Arts Council, which means it's our money, which is publicly funded. I think basically people should do not what they say in the book. Parents should write to the schools to find out if this book is in that particular school, or indeed if it's in a local library, because it's going into libraries too. They should do that. And if not, then they should certainly boycott it and not buy it.
And isn't this indicative, Peter Whittle, of perhaps a broader point, and that is, funny enough, a lack of diversity of thought about what our kids are taught now. Undeniably, for example, at my daughter's school, it's now routine for Muslim kids to be allowed to not have anything to do with Christmas. In fact, Christmas is barely mentioned. It's a C word that's becoming censored out. It's becoming banned. There's a feeling that this progressive ideology is one-way traffic and we're actually losing critical balance.
Well, quite, because all of our institutions are infected with this stuff now. My view is a bit more hardline, Martin, that I don't think this is born out of good intentions. I don't. I think it is born out of bad intentions. I think it's one that's hostile to Britain, hostile to British history, hostile to British culture. Why else would you actually bother to put books like the one we're discussing out? It's not just a question of putting another side. It's a question, basically, of undermining, if you like, our kind of very society. And education is, in fact, one of the worst areas for this now.
Are we overreacting here?
No.
Is this, stop being gammon, No. Stop being so sensitive. It's just a kid's book.
No, it's not just a kid's book. I mean, it's propaganda. It's propaganda. There's no getting away from it. And frankly, it should be withdrawn, or people should boycott it, not buy it. But, I mean, I've got examples in my office, actually, of other books like this, that go into, primary schools. But this is a particularly egregious example. And I think it's so egregious that it's so sort of blatant that it's almost kind of naive looking.
Yeah, Peter Whittle. In fact, on Friday, we had another children's book saying men can have periods.
Yes, exactly.
And that was given to primary school kids. So I'm afraid it does seem like pretty much of a one-way ideology. Peter Whittle, of course, the founder of the New Culture Forum. Thank you very much for joining us, Martin, in the studio in Westminster. Always a delight. Now, lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including I'll speak to someone who is campaigning to stop her mum's care home from being sold to a private company in Kirklees. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom, 32 minutes past 5, and it's now being reported that 2 British tourists have been rescued and 2 are still missing after a tourist boat capsized and sank in the Red Sea. The Foreign Office here says it is supporting several British nationals and their families. That vessel was carrying 31 tourists and 14 crew when it went down near Marsa Alam on the coast of the Red Sea. The cause of the sinking is still unclear, but authorities had warned of high waves at the time. Rescue efforts are still ongoing, being led by the Egyptian military and local officials. More than 28 people have now been rescued, and we'll keep across any further details for you. A major incident's been declared in Northamptonshire this afternoon after heavy rain triggered severe flooding across the country. Billing Aquadrome Holiday Park is at the centre of that recent crisis, with around 1,000 residents affected there and some still stranded in an area cut off by floodwaters. Emergency teams, including fire and police services, are rescuing people by boat and say they expect operations could continue throughout the night. The Environment Secretary says UK flood defences are in the worst condition on record. But Steve Reid did say the government has pledged £2.4 billion in upgrades.
Well, I've been kept updated throughout the weekend on the situation that's going on, and I've just come out of an emergency meeting with the Environment Agency. First thing to say is I want to offer my sympathies to everybody who's been affected by these floods and how devastating it is if your home or your business in particular get affected in this way. But I'd also like to offer my thanks to the emergency services on the ground who have been out there straight away this weekend, making sure people are kept safe.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has been defending her budget this afternoon, telling business leaders that it's brought stability to the economy. Speaking at the CBI conference earlier, she said difficult decisions were needed to draw a line under the inheritance she said she received from the previous Conservative government. Rachel Reeves also ruled out further borrowing or tax hikes and said public services must now live within their means. She's also dismissed calls for big tax rises on businesses and said the economy is now on a firm footing. Have a listen.
We have now drawn a line under the inheritance that I faced. Public finances are now on a firm footing, and also our public services are funded in a proper way. And we've now set the envelope for those public services for the rest of this Parliament, which means we're not going to have to come back for more.
And just before I go, a quick breaking update for you coming to us from Germany. We're expecting to hear from the Defence Secretary in a short while, but we've just been hearing from the German Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius. He's speaking with his counterparts from France, Poland, Britain and Italy after talks on strengthening security and defence in Europe. The German Defence Minister saying that Russian war on Ukraine is, he says, no longer a regional conflict, warning that it has now reached an international dimension. That recent warning from the German Defence Minister. And as I say, we are expecting to hear from the UK's Defence Secretary, John Healey, later this evening. We will keep across any lines from him as they come into us and bring the very latest. That's the latest from me for now, from the GB Newsroom. Plenty more still to come with Martin, and I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch, you know what to do. You go to gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch and I'll read out the best of your comments before the end of the show with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News and with Britain's News Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A mix of clear spells and showers, though some longer spells of persistent rain in parts of northwest Scotland, turning chilly as we head into the overnight period too. Storm Bert, that sits just to the northeast of the country, still continues to bring in some outbreaks of rain across the north and plenty of blustery winds across the country too, with a yellow Met Office rain warning in force across parts of northwest Scotland. Still plenty of blustery showers elsewhere, particularly in western areas, though a few feeding in inland overnight too, particularly across parts of the south where they could be heavy and a little bit blustery at times too. There will still also be plenty of clear skies overnight where it's going to turn chilly with a risk of fog by the time we reach the morning, perhaps even some localised frost in places too. So those showers continuing around coastal areas of Scotland, still quite blustery in parts of northeast Scotland too, but under those clear skies a risk of frost as well. Still plenty of showers across northern coasts of Northern Ireland too and northwest England, and still plenty of those showers feeding into western parts of Wales and England. It's mainly across central and far eastern areas where we'll see those clear skies, those drier spells overnight and that risk of frost by the time we reach the morning. Heading into to Tuesday, it's generally a much brighter day for all. Still can't rule out a risk of a shower, particularly once again around northwestern coasts at times, along southern coasts too. But many areas seeing plenty of sunshine, much lighter winds through the day as well. So even though temperatures fairly similar, it's probably going to be feeling like a much more pleasant day on offer. Away from northeastern Scotland, where there's still going to be plenty of blustery showers too. Now into tomorrow evening, we'll begin to start to see a bit of a change. Heavy outbreaks of rain and some blustery winds moving in from the southwest, but to the far north, a clear and cold night on offer with some frost and possibly some icy stretches. And some frost and more fog as we head to the end of the week too. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue in South Yorkshire on the M1. The inside lane on that 4-lane stretch remains coned off northbound, approaching the Rotherham exit junction 35, where highways are recovering a lorry that is broken down. In Oxfordshire, northeast of Banbury, the A361 is closed by the Chagos turn-off because of flooding. And in South London at Wallington, the A237, the Manor Road, closed because of a building that was damaged by the storm yesterday, just by Malden Road. Heading towards London up the M23, where it meets the M25, really slow after a car broke down that's now on the hard shoulder, been moved off the entry slip road after being recovered. And trains are suspended Exeter Central to Oakhampton and Barnstaple because a tree fell on the line, and no trains on London North Western via Northampton between Milton Keynes Central and Coventry. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 5:39 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Castle Grange and Claremont House dementia care homes in Kirklees face uncertainty as the council considers selling them as businesses. And families fear the private sector may not meet the complex needs of dementia patients, risking lower care standards or even repurposing the facilities. And campaigners, unconvinced by the local council's assurances, are fighting to protect vulnerable residents and preserve high-quality care. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by the daughter of one of the patients at the home who is campaigning to save the homes from privatisation, and that is Donna Mallinson. Donna, welcome to the show and thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Tell us about your wonderful mother, Elaine, and she's in the care home, and tell us why you have concerns about the business being privatised.
Yeah, so my mum moved into Claremont House approximately 2.5 years ago when her situation of dementia deteriorated. And since then, it's been a slow and steady decline. We have had experience of private sector homes before, in fact, 2 different private sector homes owned by 2 different companies. And the level of care, the standard of care, it just wasn't good enough. And my mum did suffer neglect and even abuse on one occasion. So we were in an extremely desperate situation and we were really scared for our mum's future. We found Claremont House and we've never looked back. The standard of care, the level of care, the specialist care, the way all the residents are treated is just absolutely amazing. They treat all the residents with respect and dignity. Everyone is treated as an individual. They're not tick boxes or bands of care. They are treated with respect, as they should be, because each and every one of these residents has had a past and a life and contributed to society, fought in wars, and their lives still matter. And you just don't get that level of care in the private sector. And we know that from personal experience, as I've said, and so do many, many other families who are in this situation with us. This is why we are so desperate to keep both these homes open. In some cases, families have been told that the private sector just cannot meet the care needs of their loved ones. So it just leaves us with this constant fear and dread and worry of what's going to become of our parents or our husbands or wives or grandmas. So we are in an extremely desperate situation, and we just need to do everything we can to keep these homes open and keep our loved ones' lives protected for as long as we can.
And Donna, there's some wonderful pictures on screen there of you with your mum and I believe with your sister as well. It's always just wonderful to see. She's clearly, adores you. We know all people with dementia, they just love continuity. They love familiarity. And isn't that the point, Donna? One of the huge things I've read through some of your mum's condition, she gets very distressed when you're not around, and she loves it when you are around. And same with the staff. The staff the staff you recognise, the staff you hear the sound of their voice, you cherish that continuity, that certainty, don't you? And privatising a business, one of the huge concerns of that is that would be taken away and would cause distress to people in great need.
Well, it will. I mean, the very word privatisation, the owners they want to make as much profit as they can. So the care levels will drop, the staff levels will drop. They won't employ specialist carers who can deliver the specialised care that all these residents need. And so all that will change. And as you've just alluded to, it's familiarity. Many of the existing staff have also experienced working in private sector homes, and they don't want to go back to working to the private sector because they know everything is cut. They don't get the time that's required to spend with the residents. So they're looking for other jobs. They're looking at leaving the care industry, which is really sad. But that just shows. Sorry.
And Donna, just talking about the cost as well, because I understand at the moment, it's £1,290 a week per person to care for people in the home, and if it's privatised, it would only cost the council £853 a week. Well, that's £437 cheaper, right? So how are those cost-cutting measures going to be reached? And you're saying it could only be either increased fees to the patients or a deterioration of the care because there'll be less of it.
Well, the finances is quite a complex situation, but in a nutshell, this is another one of the worries because a private owner will increase the fees, which means that the residents who are self-funding will have to pay more, which means their pot of money will run out quicker. For those residents who don't self-fund for whatever reason, and the council contributes to their care, it means the council will only pay a certain amount of money. So that shortfall between what the private owner wants and what the council will pay falls to the families of the residents, and in the form of what we call a third-party top-up. So this is putting huge pressure on family members now who are thinking that they've got, between £100 and £400 a week to find to top up the fees to pay for their loved one's care.
OK. Well, thank you. It's an amazing fight you're putting up there, Donna Mallinson. Thank you very much for joining us, and love to your beautiful mum, Elaine, and to your sister.
Thank you.
And happy to help shine a light on this. Thank you, Donna. And we do have a statement, pleasure, to read out from the leader of Kirklees Council, and that's Carol Pattison. She says this: we are faced with a situation where we have to make some very, very hard decisions as to what we can afford to continue to provide by way of service. We've been able to find some private sector providers so we can transfer these homes to them. We're not closing them because we never wanted to close them. That's a statement there from Kirklees Council. Now, coming up, we'll discuss Donald Trump's plan to kick transgender troops out of the US military on his return to the White House. In fact, he said he might do it on his very first day. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Go on, Eamon.
Well,
Go on,
Eamon.
What does Eamon mean?
I mean, I must admit, I never liked my name, ever. And then I realised that it's made me more individual because there are no other Eamons about. So therefore I can go by, whereas no one would know Isabel. She's Isabel Webster. She'd have two names.
But it's all means something like blight or blight.
But I was named after the TV presenter. My mother was in hospital, couldn't think of a name, and the TV presenter, Eamon Andrews, popped up on the television, and she said, "Oh, he's got hair like my Eamon," and she called me Eamon after him.
Oh, lovely! Oh,
that
fantastic!
That may have determined what I ended up doing.
My mum said if I was a boy, I would have been called Marius. Marius? Which I think is quite a weird choice. It is Marius a weird Webster.
one.
I'm forever grateful.
Whatever you call a child, however weird or strange, whatever, the child becomes that name. So
Over half of us judge people instantly on their name. So we make assumptions on people based on their name. I'm not sure I do, but I mean, you mentioning you changing your name from an African name to a more anglicised name.
No doubt about that. So there's no doubt about that. Like, you know, if I'm on the blower, I sound like a London boy.
Yeah.
But I turn up as Keezy. Boy, mate, you don't belong around here.
Yeah.
That was what it was like 50 years ago. You know, now, I mean, and like even today. So sometimes today, like, I get some speaking engagements, and I will wear my traditional wear because, you know, I've accepted Keezy and my African heritage. And then the abuse you get on social media, you're not British, call yourself English, mate. No. You know, and you get all sorts of lyrics. So a name, when a name says your ancestry is from another part of the country, part of the world, it can be detrimental.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's nudging 10 to 6. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now then, reports say that Donald Trump intends to remove all transgender people from the US military. The president-elect will use an executive order to enforce the change, which could come in as soon as his very first day in office. Now, that would lead to the dismissal of thousands of military personnel at a time when the US has already fallen desperately short of their military recruitment targets. So, I would ask Donald Trump, why is he doing it? What is the point? Well, joining me now to discuss this live from New York is Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, a delight to see you for the first time, I think, since that historic election victory for Donald Trump. So all eyes now on the first day, the early days of the new presidency. We're expecting some fireworks, and here's a big firework straight out the box to kick all transgender people out of the US military. What's driving his thought process on this?
Yeah, Martin, it's a great question. Great to see you. But I think it's driven partly by basically the mandate that Trump has received. You know, the voters decided that they were just sort of tired of this woke psychology and this whole DEI movement. And I think there's a real pushback against it. So I think you'll see several kind of messages being sent by the administration, by the transition team. And a poll came out yesterday that had 59% of Americans with favorable views of the Trump transition so far. So that's a really incredible number, considering, you know, generally speaking, it's a 50-50 country, and Trump won only, you know, a fraction of a percentage point over 50% of the vote. So this is really good news so far.
And Greg, I was just smiling there when you talked about Trump's transition and Trump's transition team, because, of course, this is about transgender people in the military. And on a serious point, though, to be fair, Donald Trump said he would do this all along, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. And indeed, Greg Swenson, there's been a huge amount of work into the effect, the impact of trans people in the military. There's been a huge conversation, for example, about the high cost of their medical insurance and their medical treatment to the taxpayer.
Yeah, it's pretty outrageous to put that burden on the taxpayer, and a lot of people, join the military with that in mind, with the medical coverage in mind. So I think this, again, there's just a pushback overall. You've got a bill in Ohio right now passed by the House and the Senate, and hopefully Mike DeWine signs it, to protect it's called the Protect All Students Act. It's basically to guarantee single-sex bathrooms, single-sex locker rooms for sports and overnight facilities. You've got the massive pushback against the Jaguar ad that came out last week. You've got the University of Virginia, a student wearing a Make America Christian Again hat was scrutinized or penalized by the people at UVA, and that was faced massive pushback on the right. And then you've got reports coming out about the negative effects of this DEI insanity. And so, a report titled "The DEI Produces Hostile Attribution Bias." So it's a little bit of psychology there, but it's really increasing hostility, and it's making harder for the military and other organizations like it to recruit and to hit their targets, and also to maintain morale. So I think all these things are going to be considered. Again, most of the pushback is very well received by the voters, by the people here, and especially the taxpayers. So, look, I think it's a good sign that President Trump has promised to really throw a grenade in the room on this whole DEI and ESG insanity, and it's very welcomed both in the public sector as well as the private sector, Martin.
OK, Greg Swenson, thanks for joining us live from the Big Apple, the chair, of course, of Republicans Oversee UK. You take care, man. There you go, my friend. Now it's time for our poll of the day. And today we were asking, do you want another general election now? Don't forget, 2.3 million people want that to happen. And the final result is this, an astonishing landslide, the kind of landslide politicians can only dream of. 98% of you have said yes, you do want another election. What? Another one, as they might say in Bristol. Only 2% say no. 98% of GBNews viewers want another election. Get involved in tomorrow's poll. gbnews.com/poll is the way to do it. Now, I'll be back at 7 till 8. I'm covering tonight for Nigel Farage. Trust me, that is going to be one heck of a show. Rupert Lowe, MP, will be on that. He's just asked an astonishing question about publishing the data for the nationalities of foreign criminals. Jubes & Co. is up next. But first, here's your weather with On, and I'll see you back here, same time, 7 o'clock.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A mix of clear spells and showers, though some longer spells of persistent rain in parts of northwest Scotland, turning chilly as we head into the overnight period too. Storm Bert, that sits just to the northeast of the country, still continues to bring in some outbreaks of rain across the north and plenty of blustery winds across the country too, with a yellow Met Office rain warning in force across parts of northwest Scotland. Still plenty of blustery showers elsewhere, particularly in western areas, though a few feeding in inland overnight too, particularly across parts of the south where they could be heavy and a little bit blustery at times too. There will still also be plenty of clear skies overnight where it's going to turn chilly with a risk of fog by the time we reach the morning, perhaps even some localised frost in places too. So those showers continuing around coastal areas of Scotland, still quite blustery in parts of northeast Scotland too, but under those clear skies, a risk of frost as well. Still plenty of showers across northern coast of Northern Ireland too, and northwest England, and still plenty of those showers feeding into western parts of Wales and England. It's mainly across central and far eastern areas where we'll see those clear skies, those drier spells overnight, and that risk of frost by the time we reach the morning. Heading into into Tuesday, it's generally a much brighter day for all. Still can't rule out a risk of a shower, particularly once again around northwestern coasts at times, along southern coasts too. But many areas seeing plenty of sunshine, much lighter winds through the day as well. So even though temperatures fairly similar, it's probably going to be feeling like a much more pleasant day on offer. Away from northeastern Scotland, where there's still going to be plenty of blustery showers too. Now into tomorrow evening, we'll begin to start to see a bit of a change. Heavy outbreaks of rain and some blustery winds moving in from the southwest, but to the far north, a clear and cold night on offer with some frost and possibly some icy stretches. And some frost and more fog as we head to the end of the week too. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues on the M1 in West Yorkshire. The southbound exit slip road is partly blocked junction 45 to the east of Leeds, where a lorry has broken down. In Oxfordshire, northeast of Banbury, the A361 remains closed on Williamscott Hill at the Chagos turn-off because of flooding, and a car's broken down on the northbound exit of the M40 in Buckinghamshire, closing a lane at junction 4, the A404 High Wycombe Handy Cross exit, of course. In Berkshire, on the M4, the motorway is partly blocked westbound from junction 11 to 12. West of Reading because of an obstruction. In South London at Wallington, the A237, the Manor Road closed after a building was damaged by the storm yesterday morning into Park Road. And in Somerset, south of Ilchester, the A37 is closed northbound because of the flooding, causing long queues back towards Yeovil. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co. Coming up tonight, an online petition to have another general election.